Good morning. Welcome to the Board of County Commissioners agenda setting and work session for Tuesday, March 5th, 2019. I'm Board Chair John Hutchings, and to my right is Commissioner Ty Menser. To my left is Vice Chair Commissioner Gary Edwards, and we have La Bonita Bomar. Wasn't even close. Is it Monday? Kind of is. Robin Campbell, Assistant County Manager, Finance Director, and County Manager Ramiro Chavez, and La Bonita Bomar, Clerk of the Board. And to the far right we have Brian.
Brian Dominique, Public Information Officer for the Board.
Megan Porter, Public Information Supervisor.
Robin Courts, Executive Assistant.
See, if I pass the mic, I never get it wrong. Thank you. So we're starting with our agenda for this morning, and we're not going to follow the agenda. Out of respect for staff, we're going to begin with the Board of Health agenda rather than the Board of County Commissioners. So we'll start with the Board of Health agenda. Come on up and welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Shelley Slaughter, Director of Thurston County Public Health and Social Services and Administrator of the Board of Health. And here with me is
Lydia Hodgkinson, Clerk of the Board of Health.
So out of respect, I understand you've got other pressing engagements, so we're going to get you in and out.
I do. Thank you very much.
So we're going to call the meeting to order at 3:30 this afternoon, or thereabouts. And we're going to go through proclamations and presentations after we do an approval of the agenda and the meeting minutes from January. So proclamations.
So essentially the agenda that you have is a continuation of the agenda that was canceled due to the snow last month, with the exception of the proclamations. And so we added 2 new proclamations for the month of March, and that includes National Developmental Disability Awareness Month. And Jennifer Poptuk Hakim, who is our program specialist, will be there along with some clients to accept that proclamation.
Okay.
It is also National Brain Injury Awareness Month, and we know that's an issue that's near and dear to your heart, Chair Hutchings. And so we believe there may be some people there to accept that proclamation as well, and that your aide was working on coordinating that piece of it.
All right, thank you. And any questions, comments?
You said this afternoon, but we're actually talking about next week, right?
It is next week, not today.
Yes. See, I told you. Yes, next week, the 12th.
Yes.
That's what this agenda is. It says 12th. Any other comments? Okay. All right, thank you. Then we'll have number 3 on the agenda for next Tuesday is the opportunity for the public to address the BOH. Any concerns or aware of any people that might come in with an issue?
Not that I'm aware of. I haven't heard any confirmation, but I know that there are many parents in our community that are concerned about immunization and vaccination, particularly bills being considered by the legislature right now. So I don't know if we'll have any public comment, but at this time I'm not aware.
Okay. Are you aware of any? You aware of any? Okay. I always think that the hot topics are the immunizations and the measles outbreak, but also homeless issue and Board of Health issues and such like that.
Yes,
Abandoned
that
homes.
could be possible as well, and I may be able to confirm that before our next meeting.
Okay. Then we'll move on to item 4 on the agenda, consent items A through B, or A and B. First one's acceptance of work session notes. That's pretty easy. And the next is approval of Washington State Department of Health MOU.
Yes.
What is about that?
You reviewed that last month, and that is the renewal of our regular memorandum of understanding that we have with the Department of Health that delineates our responsibilities in Thurston County for monitoring Group B water systems. And I believe there's a full attachment in your packet. If you have further questions, we could remove it from consent.
Yeah, I remember discussing that now. Questions?
No, sir. No.
Good, thank you, Shelley. Now we're going to number 5, department issues, oral health project in Thurston County.
Yes, so I have Leslie Price here, who is our public health nutritionist, who's going to be presenting on our oral health project. As you may recall, we received a grant from the Acora Foundation to increase dental education and awareness in partnership with our schools and doing public education about the importance of oral health. There will be several members of the community and I believe the foundation that will be here to participate in that presentation. Last month on your February agenda was a Dental Health Awareness Month proclamation, and those community members wanted to be present to accept that proclamation to raise awareness of this really important health factor, particularly for children. And so they will be here, and we're hoping that although the proclamation won't be read as part of our proclamations for this month, since that month is past, but we can still present them with a signed copy of the last month's proclamation that you approved, and they're going to share a little bit about their program and then our program in public health about that.
Good. Anything to add? Questions? On some of these, not all, and not even probably 50%, but some of these are like somebody in a costume comes in and a big toothbrush or a tooth or something. Are we going to have anything like that?
Like the tooth fairy.
Something.
I don't believe the tooth fairy's coming to this one.
Okay.
Although
All right.
we always enjoy her presentations.
Thank you.
No costumes, no teeth brushing.
All right.
This event.
Agenda number 6, department items. The NFP. Tell us about that.
Yes, so we want to just take a few moments of our Board of Health agenda to recognize our Nurse Family Partnership Program and achieving the Infant Early Childhood Mental Health Certification. So our nurses have gone through this rigorous process to receive this certification. It is very difficult to get. It's a huge achievement. And also, Gretchen Toller will be discussing and sharing updates about home visiting in the state of Washington.
All right. Will she be mentioning the grant that was received?
Yes. Yes, you saw the press release that recently went out for the award that we received from the National Service Office for the Nurse Family Partnership Program. And as you recall, the BoCC approved our receipt of those funds back in November that increased our regional home visiting for at-risk children and families in Mason and Lewis counties, added additional nursing staff. And so we're very proud of that, and we'll just be highlighting the overall successes of that program and recognizing the nurses that have worked so hard to receive these achievements, and they'll be present. So we're hoping to really acknowledge and appreciate them.
Wonderful. Anything, Ty? Gary? Beautiful. Next is department items, resolution H-1-2019, urging legislation to support local public health services.
Yes, so we are requesting that the Board of Health approve a resolution urging the Washington State Legislature to pass foundational public health this year. You'll recall 2 years ago that they did pass foundational public health, but at a lesser amount. And so this year, as our membership in the Washington State Association of Local Public Health Officials, they have urged boards of health to adopt such resolutions to show our support to the legislature and really highlight the importance of foundational public health, which includes things like our communicable disease programs, environmental health, vital records, and other critical services that only local public health provides and is deeply underfunded. And Art Starry, as our legislative representative on WSALFO, will present that resolution to you and give some background on it.
Good. Can't wait. Anything?
No, sir. Nope.
I do have a question in
Yes,
terms
sir.
of the timing, and that's, I believe, is related to House Bill 1497, correct?
Yes.
In House, in foundational public health, right now The governor's budget includes $20 million, I believe. So help me understand what the resolution is going to do related to the legislative actions.
Well, what we hope is that the legislature will be hearing from and continuing to hear how important this is to local government, including this is one of Washington State Association of Counties priorities, as well as WSALFO's and many others' priorities, to hopefully increase and allocate more funding than is included in the governor's budget. While we're very grateful for that acknowledgement, that's essentially maintaining of what 2 years ago was included for foundational public health. And the assessment that we participated in as all the local health jurisdictions in the state of Washington by Burke Consulting showed actually an over $400 million deficit for public health. So $100 million is what was agreed upon by our advocates as something that we would be aiming for that would provide sufficient funding for each of the local health public jurisdictions to be able to make a difference and make an impact in their public health outcomes.
So is similar counties, other counties are doing the same type of resolution, do you know?
Yes. Yes. I don't know how many have gone thus far. In fact, my next meeting and why I had to go early today was to attend a meeting of all the local health jurisdiction directors in the state, along with WSALFO officials, to be able to get updated on where we're at with this. But I know Lewis County passed their resolution at their Board of Health last week. I believe Mason County did as well. I think King County did. So many boards of health have been doing resolutions like this just to show that extra support of just how important it is locally.
That's a good question. Are there partner bills with it, or are there similar House bills?
The only thing that I have is the House Bill 1487, and that is the associated with the Foundation of Public Health. And I think the initial request was close to, as you stated, close to $1 billion.
Ooh.
In order to meet the minimum requirements of the public health needs in the state. The governor's budget included only $20 million, and I believe at least the attempt is to increase that to $100 million during the budget appropriation process.
Very interesting, okay. That takes us to department items number 8, Sammy Bird coming in to give us information on the food and environmental service section.
Yes, so we're really excited to share this information with you, not only about our food program, but also what we call kind of our food, schools, and pools programs. So you had asked questions last month about what do we do for schools, how do we inspect their safety, and what do we do for all of our different water recreational facilities, as well as our vector programs. So including things like bats and things of that nature. So the whole entire program will be covered in a dynamic 15-minute presentation.
He'll tell us where to eat and where not to eat? Probably not.
I don't believe he will be covering that, but he will be sharing about what that process is like, and there'll be several of our amazing staff along with him.
Great, that'll be good. Anything on that? Hi, Gary.
Oh, good.
All right, then we get to Board of Health members. We share any health-related activities that we've been involved in or questions and such, and then we have the health officer's report. Dr. Rachel Wood will be in the house.
Yes, she will.
And then we have your report.
Yes.
Okay.
And we'll most likely be giving you, Dr. Wood will be covering measles updates as well as some other infectious disease updates.
Okay. Anything else regarding BOH? Romero, anything? All right. That concludes the BOH, and we'll adjourn after that meeting next Tuesday. Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you very much.
Lydia.
And thank you for the modification to your agenda
Yes,
today.
you're welcome. Now we'll get to the review of today's agenda, BoCC agenda, and we'll call the meeting to order at 2 p.m. And Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Ty Menser. And then approval of the agenda, hopefully, and approval of board meeting minutes. And then presentations. The first presentation is going to be from our county manager.
Yes, and there will be staff from Public Works as well as Central Services. And that will give the commission an opportunity to thank both groups for their response during the recent snowstorm. I will give you some numbers this afternoon, but just to give you a preview, Public Works plowed close to 1,200 lane miles during the 4-day event.
What, 1,200 miles?
1,200 lane miles.
Lane miles, yeah, that's a difference.
They used 9 dump trucks, which is they were outfitted with plows in the front, 4 pickup trucks with plows, and 3 graders. They applied 25,000 gallons of brine to pre-treat county roadways. They spread 300 tons of sand. They cleared 279 road blockages, including trees down. And they answered on those 5 days 1,118 calls related to the citizens' concerns.
How many?
1,118. And I will describe that this afternoon as well. But also, as you know, our central services also do a great job in maintaining the facilities that we go through this process. And plowing all the parking lots that we need, and making sure all the facilities are accessible to not necessarily county employees, but also to the citizens. So staff from facilities work close to 60 hours of overtime during those 4 days. And also, as part of the central services, the fleet, the ER&R functions are essential as well to do that. And that supports the public works equipment. And those 5 days, they opened and conducted 235 repairs related to equipment during those 5 days. They completed 10 service calls, and the week prior to those events, they spent 68 hours installing and repairing vehicles just to make sure they have chains, they have all the plows in front of it, and equated to close to 70 hours of overtime, 56 hours troubleshooting, and 30 hours of service calls. And then that includes the sheriff's office vehicles and as well as public works vehicles. And the staff from both departments will be here this afternoon. And again, I will introduce with those numbers, and I will give you, commissioners, the opportunity to say thank you for the great work they have done responding to the snow events. And I know during the process we have received many phone calls from citizens that perhaps we didn't have the chance to get into the local roads. But the storms were such that as soon as we plowed one of the major arterials, that is our first priority, we have to come back and do it again because the snow was just keep coming down. So kudos to Public Works and kudos to Central Services, and that will be part of the presentation this afternoon.
Okay.
How many trees again? I didn't get that.
I don't have the specifics, but I can get that for you. But it was close to 279 road blockages, which includes some trees.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Anything, Ty? Does all that overtime, equipment repair, sand, brine, all that stuff, how is that? Do we have that down to dollars? How much that storm cost the county?
Well, we
Approximately.
We have. I don't have the numbers, but I can get that to you this
Just
afternoon.
wondering.
But just to give you a perspective in terms of preparedness to this type of events, this is included as part of the Public Works budget just to deal with those emergencies. Whether we met in terms of the budget, the amount or not, we'll get that information to you. But something to say about the materials. We never run out of materials related to brine, sand. And in fact, the City of Olympia ran out of those materials, which they reached out to the county, and we were able to help the City of Olympia by selling some of the material. So, and
Good.
that is part of the regional cooperation that we go through it. But again, it's just the preparedness that we go through just to make sure that we are ready for this type of events, and we were.
Yes, and it's appropriate that we partner with our cities to help them out. And we activated our EOC, didn't we? Emergency Operations Center?
We
That
activated
storm?
but at a level 2, and it was a virtual opening, meaning it was a lot of phone conversations. I participated in a couple of conference calls. And again, it's just everyone gives the opportunity for everyone to be on the same page as to how we're going to be responding. And your Director of Emergency Services is here, and he is the one who manages those events as well.
I tell you, and though some citizens, very few, lament that their local cul-de-sacs or roads street wasn't cleared out, I couldn't be prouder of our public works staff, from Jennifer all the way down to the person fixing a plow.
Yeah. And I believe we were able to get to the local roads by Wednesday and Thursday of that week, which I think that was incredibly responsive from my perspective.
Yeah, I'm very proud. Well, that'll be a good presentation. And there's another one, a proclamation for Women's History Month.
Yes, for your consideration is have a proclamation of Women's History Month. So this afternoon, Dr. Thelma Jackson will be coming and to receive the proclamation. And I will give a little bit of a background as to Dr. Jackson's history and in terms of her professional career. And also, I'd like to give you a couple of historical pieces of information. Beginning with 1987, Congress passed in the law to declare March as the National Women's History Month. And a couple pieces of information. Back in 1920, that was the year in which women were granted the right to vote through the 19th Amendment. In 1974, Ms. Margie Young was the first woman elected to the Board of County Commissioners. And she was pivotal in creating, at that point, was the county administrator, which is now the county manager position. Also in 1981, Sandra Day O'Connor was the first woman appointed to United States Supreme Court. In 1983, Sally Ride becomes the first woman in space. And as you know, in 2016, Hillary Rodham Clinton was the first woman nominated for president in a major political party. So I'll give that as an introduction to Ms. Dr. Thelma Jackson. And again, she will provide a little bit of a background related to Rebecca Howard. And Rebecca Howard, you probably seen this picture. You know where's the bread peddler store downtown Olympia?
The what store?
The bread peddler.
Bread
Oh,
peddler?
sure.
Yeah. On the sidelines, on the side of the building is this mural of Miss Rebecca Howard. And the history goes that was the first African-American businesswoman in Thurston County.
Wow. Do you have the year? Probably not, do you?
No, I believe Dr. Jackson will give you perspective on that as well.
Very cool. Will she be bringing anybody with her, do you know?
No, I don't know. I think she's coming by herself.
Okay. Well, she's a powerhouse. Anything?
No, sir.
Thank you, Ramiro. Then we have the opportunity for the public to address the board. Are we aware of any potential topics coming?
Not at this point, and I don't have any, not at this point.
You aware of anybody wanting to come?
No.
Yeah. You, Gary?
No, I don't.
Okay. County manager's update?
Yes, I just have I will report back on the last 2 weeks of some of the activities the commissions have been engaged, particularly the emergency training. And I'm sure on your time you will explain a little more in detail your experience, particularly Commissioner Mensah and Commissioner Hutchins, related to that particular training. And I will provide my perspective from the administrative point of view. And but also I like to highlight as we go through, and always we find surprises, not necessarily surprises internally, but externally. And I was just made aware of this publication from OpenGov, and that is, was published on January 24, 2019. And the title of this publication says, Three Inspiring Government Performance Management Leaders to Watch in 2019. And this is a national publication. With a pleasant surprise that one of those three inspiring leaders is your own Assistant County Manager, Robin Campbell. She was highlighted from this publication. So I will make sure that
Congratulations.
I will highlight that this afternoon. It's a well worth statement to make, and I think it's just a reflection of what Robin brings to the county.
Did you give a speech? No. Okay. Well, that's wonderful. When did you, were you shocked or surprised?
I was very surprised. Yeah, I was, it's in Governing Magazine, and I was looking at the article headlines on an email, and I was going, ooh, you know, is there anyone I know, and what are they doing, and maybe I could call someone, and one of the three people was me.
Jeez.
So that was very surprising.
What's the title of the article? Do you remember?
Yes, the title of this article is Three Inspiring Government Performance Management Leaders to Watch in 2019.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, we're doing great things here in Thurston.
And I will highlight
Women's History Month.
and I highlight a couple of the areas in which Robin has
Okay.
been pivotal on this.
Good.
That will be my report.
All right. Item 3 is the consent item, A, B, and C. Letter A is Human Resources, reclassifying positions.
Yeah, this is for your recommendation. The Department of Human Resources have gone through the process in making a business assessment of their needs. So for your considerations, two classifications. One is reclassifying a position from a business applications administrator to a senior human resources analyst. And this is the result of the desk audit they did on an individual who's currently using that position. This particular action will result in increasing the budget for this position from $7,657 to $7,937, an increase of $280 a month, or just about 3.7%. This is covered by the Benefits Administration Fund. The second action for your consideration is the reclassification of a vacant position from a resource analyst to a human resources specialist. This particular action will reduce the budget from $7,378 to $5,520, a decrease of $1,858 a month, or 33.7%. And I believe those two items is a reflection as to how our directors look at their current positions and make the best possible decision as to how they can fit that. Some may result in salary increases, and some may result in reducing that, but really it's a reflection of addressing the business needs. And so there's both actions have an impact to the general fund, positive impact to the general fund, of $1,858 a month. And the other one is coming from the Benefit Administration Fund, which doesn't impact the general fund.
Anything?
Sounds good.
All right. And B, Emergency Services, an interlocal joint purchasing agreement between Thurston County and 911.
Yeah, this is an interlocal agreement by Emergency Services. And on the motion, we need to add that you also authorize the director to sign this interlocal agreement. Under normal circumstances, the amount of $40,000 is within the purview of the director to sign in a particular contract. The reason becomes before you is because it's an interlocal agreement. And an interlocal agreement is the board needs to take an action and enter into the interlocal agreement. And the purpose of this is to partner with Thurston County 911 Communications to go through purchases of miscellaneous goods and services for up to $40,000. This just allows us to piggyback in a way the current contract the 911 has, so we can purchase those equipments related to the Medic One services. And again, for this afternoon, we will add La Bonita. Okay. Authorize the Director of Emergency Services to sign the agreement.
All right, well, I've got some questions.
Yeah.
You say this is new, and so what have we, number one, what have we been doing before this, once this gets signed or authorized or approved?
Yeah, Kurt, yeah, please.
Good morning, Kurt Harden, Director of Emergency Services. What we have is we have one purchasing agreement already with one of our departments. This is to put the purchasing agreement with the other department as well. So in the past, we've been able to do a joint purchasing agreement with the other department because that's already been in place and approved by the Board of County Commissioners. However, based on legal advice, we can't use that particular purchasing agreement for the other department. So this will clean it up, and so we can do a joint purchasing together with TCOM.
And this won't be an annual renewal, this will be until either party chooses to get out of it?
Correct, and it only authorizes the purchase from the emergency services perspective up to the $40,000, which is within my authority.
Okay. No? Anything?
Good.
Okay. Thank you, Kurt. Department items, agenda number 4, Community Planning and Economic Development. Approval of the ILA between WSU and
Commissioner,
Thurston County.
Item 3C is your.
Oh, I'm sorry, I already scratched it,
voucher
3C.
list.
I scratched it ahead of time, thought we already hit it, but no. Financial services, the voucher list. Any questions on the voucher?
No.
No. All right. Now, with your approval, we'll go to number 4. And I don't mean that it's...
Ouch.
No. I don't mean it's snarky. I really don't. I've had some snafus already this morning. Approval of the ILA.
Yeah, this is a yearly in-local agreement with the Thurston County, Washington State Extension for $145,239, and again, it's for 2019. This is already included in the budget. And what it does is we contribute towards the salary of the director of the extension by $24,150. $46,350 is gears to the 4-H coordinator. The stormwater management extension coordinators for $25,000. The working lands resource management coordinators for $20,000. And the 4-H assistant is for $21,737. And again, that sums up to $145,237. And that is our contribution to the extension.
I like 4-H assistant. That's cool. Questions?
This is within our, we budgeted for.
Yeah, it's just, in a way, we just need to formalize that,
Yeah.
the transaction.
Got it.
Okay. Is that the same as it was the level last year, or is it an increase?
I can't remember, but I think it's just about the same.
About the same.
Maybe may have increased based on
Cost of
inflation.
living or
Yeah,
something.
cost of
Yeah,
living.
okay. Thank you. Number 5, IT, information technology.
Yes, as technology moves forward, and in this case, we used to use an application called NetMail. NetMail is no longer supported, and the archiving process becomes a little bit onerous. So this particular request is for you to authorize the decommission of old emails from 2006 to 2016. And 2016 is when we change applications to NetMail. And you see the decommission to happen in the next 5 years, and that is related to the requirements that you have of the retention of documents. So as soon as we meet the requirements of retention documents by state law, then we can go ahead and start decommission those archive emails. And that is the request before you. And Brian Ferris is here to answer any additional technical questions that perhaps I don't have.
Yeah, I do have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
So this is kind of cleansing the IT pad or something
Well,
of,
the NetMail, said if we continue to have this application, which is no longer supported, it continues to be just an application that is just there. So in a way, just to clean all that, you use the word cleansing, it's just a little bit, it's just getting rid of old emails that perhaps are outside of the retention schedule stated by law. That makes sense?
well, the retention schedule. I thought we had to keep stuff for like 7 years, but
And,
maybe
and
it's-
that's what it is, depending on that. So, and that's what, see, the request is to start decommission those emails in the next 5 years, depending on as to when those emails hit that the retention schedule, then you retire those, decommission those emails.
Okay, so we're just not going to hear about this for another 5 years then?
Probably not.
Probably not, okay.
So, my question is, we don't have a policy to clean them or delete a retention policy that follows the state law.
And at this point is we need to bring this to your attention for you to take an action.
So we're just keeping them indefinitely until the commission decides
Right.
that we can,
Yeah.
Got it.
something we can talk to Dennis about.
Yes, yeah. Dennis.
Okay.
That's it? Okay.
Thank you.
Item number 6 on Public Health and Social Services, code change regarding treatment sales tax advisory committee.
Yeah, for your consideration tomorrow, Commissioners. This is for you to set a public hearing for March 26, 2019 at 3 in the afternoon in this room, for you to take public testimony on a proposal to change the makeup of the treatment sales tax advisory committee. You had a couple of briefings related to that, and the recommendation from staff is for you to consider to change the number of the treatment sales advisory committee from 7 for up to 9 individuals. And I believe that will give a little more opportunity for the commissioners to run the perspectives that some of those individuals brings to the treatment sales advisory committee. So, and again, this is just for you to take public testimony and see where you want to go after you receive such testimony.
Okay. Gary?
I'm good.
So that again, just setting a public hearing for March 26th.
Yeah.
At 3 p.m. and I won't be here for that. I'll be out of town.
Okay. And this is line 2 initiative number 2 of the county strategic plan.
Right. Agenda number 7, item number 7, Public Works, public hearing, changes to code regarding landscaping and vegetation management.
Yeah. And this is again a follow-up to for you to consider changing the Thurston County Thurston County Code 1356310, which requires for you to take an action when Public Works like to remove a dangerous tree within the right-of-way. And I believe you took an action 3 weeks ago where you had to take an action based on the code. This particular request is for you to consider to delegate that authority to the county manager, as opposed for you to take a formal action in directing the Department of Public Works to remove a tree when that tree is dangerous. So that's really for you to consider taking public testimony, again, to delegate that authority to the county manager.
About time.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay. So did you get contacted a whole bunch then during the snow event for tree removal?
Well, in those, it's a little
Emergency?
bit different because when a tree falls into the right-of-way,
You gotta
we
get
need to
it
do
out.
it.
Yeah.
And this is related when there's many trees. They are in the process of dying, perhaps dead, and it is more a preventive measure that we go ahead and remove those trees. And again, this I think is a good proposal for you to consider after the public testimony. And as we move into the year, we're going to be looking for ways as to how we can streamline the process. and streamlining the process for the commission to consider delegating some authority to some of the smaller items that you consider on a yearly basis.
Yeah,
So more to come on those.
got it. And 7B, public hearing for forming a Summit Lake Special Use District.
Yes, this is, let me give you a little bit of history. Back in September of 2018, the Board of County Commissioners received a petition from Summit Lake property owners related to the intent to create a special use district. The statute requires that the county engineer, under the direction of the Board of County Commissioners, to review this proposal, both to make sure if that proposal meets the intent of the law, and yes, it does, because it was a minimum of 11 individuals, and I believe the petition included close to 25.
Yes.
Yeah, and so they met the minimum requirements for the petition to be legal. And also the county engineer on December 11 presented a report stating that it meets all the boundary requirements, and as well as all the financial feasibility for the special use district to consider forming in Summit Lake. So the next step in the process is really for you to hear public testimony on the intent of forming this district. And that is really just the first step. Even after you consider public testimony, you will not be taking an action in creating the district, because there's several steps that needs to be taken before you actually may consider forming the district. And again, this public hearing that is requested to be set on April 2nd, 2019 at 5 in the afternoon in this room, and I guess to hear from the rest of the residents of Summit Lake whether this, forming the special use district, is something you may want to consider or not. And the result of that will be whether you stop after the public testimony is received, or you may provide direction to staff to continue with the process. And there's other steps that will follow the public
Okay.
hearing.
Okay.
Yeah, a few things. So one of those steps eventually would be an election, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we don't ultimately, we just kind of control the process, but
Right.
ultimately the citizens would decide.
And the reason is because the legislative authority is the only one, you, who can set rates, charges, fees, taxes.
Okay.
And since this group, the special use district, is a way to tax themselves, it has to be several steps, meaning, yeah, they need to vote on how much money they want to tax themselves, and they need to vote whether they want to be part of that or not. So there's a lot of steps that need to be taken before even this district is formed.
The last time I remember talking about this, and I might be forgetting a meeting in between, but there was a question about verifying whether the folks were actually property, the signers of the petition actually own the property. I mean, 25 is probably a lot more than 10, but somebody raised that concern, and I don't remember if we got a report back on that.
I think, yeah, and Tim is here, and I believe all were residents of the one signed the petition. Go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Tim Wilson, Water Resources Manager, Public Works. So yes, following that briefing, we did go back and confirm that the petitioners were eligible, and I don't remember the exact number, but I think it was in the range of 25.
That owned property.
That owned property and were eligible to
Sign. So
petition.
we're way above the threshold.
Way above that.
Okay.
There was also a question regarding election costs from Commissioner Edwards. I did check in with the auditor's office, and really all we can give is an estimate at this point based on the Black Lake Special Use District formation, and that election was about $2,600 at the time, but there were a larger number of ballots that had to go out. There were about 1,300 properties there.
And I just, oh,
I'm sorry, no, I'm just pondering out loud. Go ahead. It'll get to me.
I'm pretty comfortable with our discussion last time, but I just thought since that discussion, I saw, and I'm sure you guys saw a bunch of, not a bunch, but a few pieces of input from citizens who own property and live somewhere else and was asking us to delay the public hearing till the summer. And we kind of split the difference there with the April. So I'm pretty comfortable with that, but I just wanted, in case we needed to have a further discussion, there were some more input that, you know, a lot of people, some significant percentage don't live in the winter and spring in Summit Lake, and so that is what it is, but.
All right, go ahead.
And I guess I'll follow up on that concern, because did we make a determination sometime back that April 2nd was kind of the halfway point versus allowing those individuals to return from wherever they're going to be in May? Or I thought we talked about May being the date.
And I think Commissioner Messer recalls, as I recall, it was summer or right away. Right away was in February, and April was, I believe, what the board decided in terms of giving direction to staff.
If I could add, the notes that I had, you had requested the last week in March for a public hearing, and then just via the process of getting it on the agenda, it got pushed 1 week.
But again, that's within your purview, and this is just a proposal from staff. If the board decides to move further into the year, that's certainly within your purview to do it.
Would there, I guess I'd just ask the question, would it make any difference to accommodate some of those concerns? I mean, if we had this, say, 2 weeks later or something. I don't know. I don't recall how many contacts I had, but I did have people that contacted me as well.
I feel like they were pushing for June, kind of, but so I'm not sure that 2 weeks in April is going to appease those particular citizens, but.
And if you may recall during the conversation, also try to be cognizant of the individuals that may be interested in forming the district. Pushing into the summer, they may not be able to get through the whole process this year. And that was part of the conversation as to how the commission provided direction that perhaps late March was a compromise, and yet you hear the public hearing, you hear the public testimony, delay the public hearing a little bit, and yet allows also the individuals who are interested in forming this district to continue with the process if that's what you decide.
Go ahead.
Okay, continuing on that thought, I'd ask Tim, okay, so we had, I don't know, 11 people sign this petition, or 25, what was it?
25.
Around 25.
Out of how many properties are going to be affected?
I'm estimating around 400 parcels.
Does that include the back properties that maybe are not exactly lakefront but might have some effect on the lake?
That's correct.
So it's going to be.
And I would also add that, to follow up on Romero's point, to be on the election has to fall on one of our elections.
Yes.
So in checking with the auditor's office to make it onto the August primary, the resolution from the commissioners needs to be submitted to the auditor's office by May 10th. So with the April public hearing, we're already pushing that window a little bit. So to extend it would put it into maybe the November election.
I guess I would ask, is there a reason that we want it in August instead of, say, at a general election in November? So does that matter, other than to expedite the process for those people that are applying to have this done?
No, procedurally, other than to satisfy the petitioners who are checking in regularly as to the progression.
Did you also receive the same contacts that possibly we as commissioners received from people wanting to extend it? Do you remember how many there were, or were you in the loop on those particular contacts?
I believe, if memory serves, I do believe I received a couple of those. I don't have the numbers at this point as to how many wanted to delay.
Is there any particular reason that we couldn't have it on the November ballot? I mean, is it more detrimental or more likely to pass, not likely to pass? Turnout is considered. What's the deal?
I'm not aware of what effect that would have.
If I had my preference, I would rather have it appear on a ballot that was going to be most likely to have the greatest number of people participate. And I would say that's probably the November ballot. I don't know that, but it seems like more people vote in the November ballot for sure than vote in a primary ballot. So
That's not for Tim, though.
no, that's
Yeah.
not for Tim, but I'm just saying, as a fairness to all parties that are affected, we might want to have it, you know, we could have had it in a special election, say in February or something as well, but not very many people turn out, school elections, fire elections, and things like that.
You're definitely right in terms of general turnout, but if we're dealing with, let's just say it's 40% of people that don't live there, they may want to vote, they may be registered to vote where they live in November because they're going to want to vote there, and they may not even be, so you may actually, if they're summer Summit Lake residents, you might get more people, but they're probably not switching their voter registration either, so.
Well, that's my question, because I do live in a lake management district, and the election is conducted outside of the normal election process. So it's not ever conducted in the primary or general election.
I see.
It's a separate mail-out issue, so.
No, because it's different.
Okay, that's what I'm
It's
wondering.
different because the lake management district is different than the special use district. And the fundamental difference is the lake management district, the county provides the administrative support. The special use district is a self-managed district, so the requirements are different.
Okay, well, when is so it's a requirement that it
It has
be
to
on one of the ballots?
In one of the scheduled regular elections.
So I would agree, they're probably not going to change their voter registration if they just own property. It sounds like a number of folks that are going to be affected are not even going to be allowed to vote on this particular issue. And especially if they're registered to vote in King County, for an example, but have a summer home. So they're going to be likely to be affected by this without ever being able to vote on it. So I'm just questioning, do we want to push it? I don't know if we want to push it. I want this issue to be addressed by as many of those 400 people that are affected as are possible. So I would like to accommodate those individuals, as many of those 400 as possible, in the hearing and in the future election. And I think the later we go towards summer, seems like it accommodates more people that might be able to attend, although those people, I think, can comment in writing or through email or something like that. But I would rather have it be held on an election day that's going to have the most number of turnout. And that's probably the November election.
Okay,
So.
go ahead, Ty.
My head's turning about this issue of, I think Commissioner's right. If Summit Lake's your summer home, but you're a property owner, it's going to directly affect you, and you're going to be taxed. But if it's tied to your voter registration and you live in Arizona the rest of the year, you're not really even going to get a vote. Is that true?
That's probably a question for
Yeah, not for you.
the auditor's office.
Well, in that scenario, probably is true. Because if you're not registered to vote in Thurston County, you will not get a ballot.
So you're going to have taxation without representation.
But that is not going to be resolved.
Right.
No.
Whether you have a public hearing in April
No, that's
or
true.
June.
It's just
That
an
is just
interesting
a
question.
personal preference by an individual who owns a
Property
place.
in
in
multiple
some
places.
May I jump in?
Sure.
To get this to this point, you needed to have, by law, 10 people,
Correct,
and we have 2.5 times that.
correct.
And though there might be 400, we've exceeded the minimal requirement to get this to this point.
That's correct.
And so there's no threshold other than what might feel comfortable to get to 50%, 75%, 51% of those there. That's just a comfort level. Is this the first time this issue has come up for Summit Lake?
It is the first time in my memory. I don't
I think it's the
recall.
first time. I don't recall this petition being passed.
And the number of people that have voiced their opinion, phone call or email, that are saying, please postpone this because we want to be there, they contacted us. In some form, they contacted us to say, please postpone it. With the purpose being, we want to be there to speak to it. Whether they're opposed or in favor, they want to be here. So they are aware of it. We don't know if where they're registered to vote. I don't think that matters. It doesn't matter to me where they're registered to vote. They want to speak to it, but they can speak to it via Skype, via email, via snail mail, via telephone message, whatever. They have avenues to address the board. So I'm not in favor of postponing it, because we may get, if we waited till June, we may get some snowbirds or other people that are vacationing here then that live here, that own property at Summit Lake, to speak to it, but they're still, we've met the threshold to get it to a public hearing. And I'm in favor of just moving it to a public hearing. That's where I am.
I guess all the legal requirements are met, it sounds like, to move this forward. But it sounds like it's about 5% of the people that are going to be affected that are pushing to move this forward. And it sounds like they want to move forward faster than what I would like to see the process move forward. I am very gun-shy about imposing a financial burden on individuals that will have no say in the process. And it sounds like there might be quite a few, we don't know. And we've got so many unanswered questions on your part, which I'm not faulting you. You had no way of knowing how this was all going to pencil out. I think we've got too many unknown issues to set this hearing for this particular date. I would like to have more information before we set the hearing and make sure we answer all these questions that you've said, well, I don't know. I'm not sure of that. I don't know. So I'm going to opt against setting this particular hearing until we have more information so that I can be assured that property owners are not ending up being taxed without any representation in the end. And it doesn't matter to me that we move it down the road a little bit. I see no rush to accomplish this. So,
What are the advantages for an SUD? What's the advantage that Summit Lake is seeking to gain from it?
They are, the subject of their petition is to protect and improve water quality. It's their drinking water source. So they are looking to take steps through public education, public outreach, or other means to protect and improve water quality.
So there's a benefit to it.
Yes, there's a benefit, and that would be the subject of the public hearing as well, for the board to decide and decide if there is a public benefit or not. That simple question per RCW is the intent of the public hearing, and based upon that, you could move forward with calling the election or not, and that election could be set.
And Public Works, you have done, Tim, extensive outreach to that community. Yes?
No, we have not. We've received the petition, and the public hearing would be the outreach.
Okay, 'cause my thinking was, if we have, this has been swirling around in the lake for quite some time now, for several months, this concept.
Correct.
We have not heard from another 50 or 75 or 300 people that would be impacted by it. We haven't heard from them one way or the other.
I have not.
But I'm presuming, and I think it's a safe assumption, most of those folks know this is it's swirling around as an issue.
I would believe so.
And they haven't come forward. And my question, I have two more questions. we're not imposing taxation on them. They're doing that to themselves. Is that correct?
That's part of the vote.
That's part of the vote.
Yeah.
And then the other question I have is, if it's going to cost $2,600 to have that special election, is there a provision where we could collect that back from the special use district?
Once it's passed, yes, that,
We can recoup that cost?
well, and actually, they provide funding to us. They already gave us a
$5,000.
$5,000 bond.
Oh, they did? Okay.
Yeah,
That's right, that's right, that's
So we're
right.
charging the work that Public Works does against that. We would charge any election costs to that, and anything that's left goes back to the district, or if our costs exceed what they put down, then we would bill them.
Okay. And I am sensitive to the taxation without representation, but I just don't see that applying here. But let me, before you get to your, you wanted to jump in a while back,
Yeah,
Romero?
if the commission decides to delay holding the public hearing, I just want to make sure that staff walks away with the specific questions or additional information that you're looking for, because personally, I couldn't get what additional information you would like, Commissioner Edwards. So, and again, if the commission decides to delay the public hearing, I would love to hear specifics as to what additional information you would like.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Okay, I guess one of the things I'd like to know is the exact number of lots that will be affected, or properties. Are those properties with homes on them, or are they parcels of larger property? When it comes to water quality, one of my concerns about Summit Lake is it's kind of in a bowl. It's surrounded by heavy logging industry. I don't know who owns that property. I've contended for quite some time that logging practices are having an adverse effect on the lake quality itself, especially if they're putting, I don't know the chemical name, but it's called urea 46. A lot of the forest practices allow a heavy nitrogen fertilizer to be utilized in the forest practices, and the Forest Practice Board at the state of Washington allows this. I'm concerned about that myself. I think it's a mistake. We allow all of our fresh water to be contaminated at the headwaters of all of our rivers. I don't care if it's the Skagit or the Nisqually or Chehalis or where it is, through this practice. I think the practice is headed in the wrong direction. And anytime I can scrutinize that, I'm going to be doing so.
So what's your direction to
Well,
staff?
my direction here is, on this creation of this district, are all those properties that eventually drain into Summit Lake included as part of this district?
The proposed boundary includes all parcels that drain into the lake, including timber owners. So there is a fair amount of acreage of private timberland that is included in this, and it would present a good portion of the revenue.
And who in those corporate entities, those corporate parcels, who gets to vote on those corporate lands?
The property owner
Did you
gets
know
a
that?
vote.
Property owner.
Well, a corporation. Who gets to vote in a corporation, whether it be Simpson, Weyerhaeuser, Green Diamond, whomever? How does that work? And I know in our district, which is different out at Lawrence Lake, the property owners were assigned a certain number of votes by their parcel and whatnot. So there's some unknowns here that I'm not up on and I'm concerned about.
2 votes per parcel with a special use district. It's
2
very,
votes per parcel no matter what?
that's correct. It's very dissimilar to lake management district. So it's 2 votes per parcel.
Okay, and just because of the water quality question, I'm not willing to vote to proceed at this time. I would be willing to set a date that is more accommodating, because I don't see any rush. That's kind of where I'm at. So whether that's in May or June, I'm not worried about pushing it onto the ballot in a timely fashion. So my concern is that we're moving possibly too fast. I'm very concerned about water quality, but I don't think all the issues are being addressed. I'm going to be talking later today on, in generalization of water quality throughout the county, and I think we're missing the boat in a lot of areas. This might be one of them. So I don't want to rush.
And it sounds like they're looking also towards their own water quality as well.
What is the pleasure of the board?
So, first of all, any other questions for staff that you need answered?
No.
Nor do I. So do we want to thumbs up or thumbs down? Press forward, thumbs up, thumbs down, don't. So
Where could we adjust the date? Is there a compromise at all on setting the date in, say, the middle of May instead of the middle of April?
So let me ask this. This is what's proposed right now. It's April 2nd at 5 p.m. for a public hearing. Just a public hearing. Are we okay with that or not?
I am not.
I'm okay with it.
Okay,
So we go to a public hearing.
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's all you wanted, Tim, wasn't it?
Yes, that's all.
You didn't know it was going to take this long,
But
did
Tim,
you?
let's follow up with those questions
Yes,
and
absolutely.
just make sure Commissioner
Yeah,
Edwards.
I'd like to know definitely the number of parcels
I will
of
get that.
property that will be affected by this district.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The last item on the agenda is commissioners and county managers' items. We'll get a chance to spell out what we did last week, and you report back,
That's correct.
Ramiro, on your stuff. And then we adjourn. That takes care of the agenda for this afternoon. We're going to take a break. It's just been over an hour, and before we jump into it, I'm aware and considerate of staff. So we'll take a 10-minute break. Please be back here just after 10:15, which makes it 10:16. 10-minute break. Thank you. That was fun.
Yeah. Well, that's the democratic process.
All right, thank you. Welcome back again. It's the Board of County Commissioners agenda setting work session for March 5th, 2019. And we're moving on to the agenda now to review the BoCC draft agenda for March 12. Yes.
Commissioner, going back to the agenda of today, March 5th, received a request from the director of the Washington State University Extension. He will not be able to be this afternoon, so we're going to be moving this item for March 26th. So you will not see this item on your agenda this afternoon.
Which item was that?
That will be item number 4
4?
on today's agenda.
Okay, that's gone.
To scratch.
Move to the 26th.
Yes, sir.
You all remember that, because I won't be here on the 26th. Okay. Thank you. So we're now looking at the March 12th agenda, and we'll kick this meeting off at 2 p.m. Call it to order, and Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Vice Chair Gary Edwards. Yes?
Chair, could I ask a question about
Certainly.
a follow-up with the county manager? Is there a time issue involved here at all on this particular issue going back to the university?
No, there's not a time issue.
Was there a reason we needed Stephen here for that?
I think
Was that just in case there was questions, or?
he's not going to be here, and also he would like to time this item with a presentation he's scheduled to give to the board
okay,
next
good enough.
week. So,
Because I didn't know there was any controversy about doing this.
No controversy. It's just a matter of scheduling.
Okay.
All right.
Excuse me.
That's all right. That's a good point of clarification. Did you want to move it along?
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll approve the agenda, presumably, and the meeting minutes. Then we jump into presentations. We have one from Public Defense.
Yeah, the Director of Public Defense, Patrick O'Connor, will come and introduce 2 new defense attorneys, Ms. Christine Black-Gary and William Tronson. So new employees. And I believe those positions were approved in the budget for 2019.
Wonderful.
And I guess I'd just comment, that's all part of our trying to control costs in that area by having in-house attorneys. That's part of that step.
Yeah, and maybe a little bit additional background on that. The Office of Public Defense, just the nature of their business, sometimes they cannot control the volume of cases they receive. That is depending on how many indigent defense are assigned to that office by the courts. So on the past model, they used to have internal attorneys, county attorneys. They manage those cases as well as what we call panel attorneys. And I believe Commissioner Mincer was one of those panel attorneys serving as a public defender. So, and within the context, when Patrick O'Connor came as a director of public defense, he started looking as to how he can probably streamline and start control some of the costs associated with the unknowns of that office. So through the process, he changed some of the contract requirements with the panel attorneys, as well as he has made a request to bring cases from panel attorneys to internal attorneys. Within the whole model, it was more of a level of investment, having a return to that investment. And the return to that investment is minimizing the unknowns that office has at the end of the year. Just to give you an example, 2 years ago, this particular office needed to go through, I believe, the 2016 budget. It was close to $400,000 they needed to come back and made it whole because it was just the nature of it. So since Patrick has come into the business and implemented the new model, both contractual changes as well as bringing some of those cases back to in-house attorneys, this past year you authorized only was $56,000, I believe, overall overrun. So that is a significant change that we have seen and minimizing the unknowns. Getting to the point of minimizing 100% of the unknowns in terms of budget is an unrealistic expectation. You always will have in this office the unknowns. But I believe I need to give kudos to Patrick O'Connor just to minimize the unknowns and having to somewhat of a reasonable dollar amount the commission can approve. That is related to, I believe, what Commissioner Edwards was stating. Those two new attorneys, you invested on that, by adding capacity to internal attorneys so we can control the costs as we move along.
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, you can never have everybody in-house because you have conflict of interest. You have to have panel attorneys. Secondly, anytime you can do flat rate contracts with those panel attorneys, that's a great boon for the agent, for the department. I would never do such a thing as a panel attorney because there is wildly, the amount of time that a case takes is wildly fluctuating based on the nature of that case. The only way you can do that is if you're doing a high volume of, panel cases to where you can sort of manage that. I didn't do a high volume, it was just a piece of my practice, so I would have never agreed. But the fact that they've been able to get a large number of their panel attorneys to do a flat rate is just really beneficial to the county and to the department. So I was skeptical that people would sign on to that, but they have. So that's really good for us.
And you're also absolutely correct, because I think some cases may take longer than the flat rate, but some cases may take less. and at the end, I believe that's how they balance that out.
Yeah.
And a byproduct of having additional in-house rather than panel is controlling the payments. For example, if a case ends in October, November, December, the panel attorney, generally we're closing out the books December or January, the 13th month, but bills will come in to the Office of Public Defense in January, February, or March, and it's not stable. It's not a stable way to do business. But he's implemented a business practice that minimizes or mitigates that quite a bit.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, good for him. All right, then we have a presentation on the High Impact Community Grant Awards.
Yeah, Ms. Kat Santana she is the Career Connected Learning Coordinator from the Pacific Mountain Workforce Development Council. She would like to come and give a presentation to the commissioners of the grants award related to the high impact community process. And I believe she will give a presentation to those award winners, which includes the Community Youth Services, GRUB, Garden Race Bounty, Yale Community Schools, and Big Brother Big Sisters of Southwest Washington.
Oh, very good. Very good. Anything? No. Okay. Item number 1 on the agenda for the 12th of March is the opportunity for the public to address the board. Might be a bit premature.
Yeah,
at this point.
No.
And then county manager's update.
If you receive any public testimony that requires a follow-up today, I will follow up next Tuesday.
All right. And we have consent items A, B, and C. Letter A, Commissioner's Office resolution extending a position.
This request for your consideration is to extend the existing temporary position, Administrative Assistant 1 in the Commissioner's Office, Budget Office. Currently, this position ends on May 2019, and the request is to extend it to June 30, 2020. This particular position is supporting the 2 essential projects that we have in place, is the policy manual as well as the ERP. And those 2 projects will take us way until 2020.
That acronym, ERP?
Is the Employee Resource Program.
Okay.
And this is a matter of just dealing with the resources needed to continue on with the process. I don't want to use names on this particular action, but I think you know.
Yeah. Have we budgeted for this already?
Yeah, this is going to be compensated within the budget office, as well as the non-departmental.
you're done.
Good.
Letter B, emergency services, sole source contract.
Yeah, the Emergency Services Department received a grant for $16,000. And this is related to provide a training related to fire prevention. And there is only one outfit that can provide that specific training because it's proprietary. And that outfit is the National Fire Prevention Association. And this is a request for a sole source. And the sole source is part of our procurement process. Only the county commissioners can agree and go into sole source. What does that mean? Meaning that on the normal process, when we secure any type of services, we need to go through a normal, either depending on the dollar amount, secure 3 quotes, or we're going through a normal bidding process or a request for proposals. And that's the normal procurement process. But within the policy allows for a sole source. In the sole source, what it does is when a specific outfit meets the requirements, they are the only ones who can provide those specific services to the county. There is no other one. And that particular action needs to be reviewed by the prosecutor attorney's office. In this particular case, they have, and they have agreed that it meets the requirements of the sole source. In this case, again, the training that is provided, that is going to be provided is proprietary by this outfit. There's no other outfit that can provide this particular training.
I'm sorry, structure, ignition, potential does not mean anything to me. What is exactly this service that's being provided?
Yeah, this is provided, it's related to provide training related to wildfire response. As you may recall, we had a wildfire last week in South County. Mm-hmm. And as a result of that, we were able to access this grant. So individuals will come in and help us train as to how we're going to be responding to wildfires.
Yeah, go ahead, Robin.
Was this request also reviewed by the auditor's office?
Yes, yeah, thank you.
All right, ignition means of a fire, and structure means protecting buildings probably.
Yeah.
Got it.
Surprised that no one else offers this training.
Yeah, one of the attorneys that just got the email saying, yeah, I agree with it. So the justification was on point.
And the auditor also, our
I believe that is
internal
the case, yeah.
auditor
Yeah.
has looked at it.
We don't have an internal auditor, but the auditor's
No,
office reviewed
but
that. Yeah.
Diana Benson fills in on these requests.
Okay, any questions? Gary? What were you thinking?
I do have questions. I think what it is, so from a wildfire preventive standpoint, they do assessments about brush being cut back from buildings or things like that. I'm not up on it. And is Kurt going to be the one that's overseeing this whole thing?
Yeah.
But he's not here to address anything on it. But we'll have next week.
Yeah, if you have any questions related to this item, I can.
But next week, we'll do a review as well,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah, do you have questions then?
No, I'm good.
Any questions?
No.
No, I'm good.
For Kurt, so we can come back prepared? I like that, the wildfire training and outreach.
Yeah.
Is there
And
outreach involved?
And we will ensure whether the auditor's office have. I did see the prosecuting attorneys. My assumption is the auditor's office has already weighed in, but I will confirm that.
Because you're familiar with CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design. The same thing, prevent wildfires through
Yeah, okay.
prevention. And then item C is the auditor's financial services, and we'll get that this next week, or this week. Item number 4 on the agenda is emergency services. Kurt Harden, public hearing regarding ambulance ordinance revision.
Yeah, for your consideration is for you to set a public hearing for Tuesday, April 9th, 2019 at 3 in the afternoon for you to receive public testimony related to potential changes to Thurston County Code Title VI. And some of the changes will include to increase the ambulance application fee from $20 to $100. As you may recall, you accepted a couple of applications in the past. This has not changed since 1992. Also, will increase the liability requirements. It goes from $1 million to $2 million that each of those outfits needs to carry on. And that has been a request by the Thurston County Risk Management Office. And also will include when paramedics must ride along with a patient via private ambulance transport, where this change will ask the ambulance companies to bill Medic 1 rather than to the patient based on their respective published rates and schedules. So that is a help to the citizens who may be in need of a transport to the hospital.
Bill Medic 1, not the patient.
Yes.
Was there also a change regarding the driver of the ambulance and the passenger did not have to, if they didn't have one, they didn't have to be an EMT? Remember having that discussion?
I don't believe that's part of it.
That was a different issue then. Okay. So for the rural part,
Yeah.
in fact, that might have been something I heard at WASAC then, because it really impacted rural communities. They didn't have EMTs on all the ambulance.
I remember the discussion.
Yeah.
We did have it here.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's part of this proposal.
All right. Item number 5, Public Health Social Services, approve amendment number 1 to an ecology contract.
Yeah.
Art Story.
And Patrick Sundberg is here to answer any particular questions. Let me give you the background on this. This is for you to consider accepting an additional $40,000 as a grant from the Department of Ecology for a total of $160,000. The period in which we accepted the initial grant, which is $120,000 from January 1st, 2018 to June 30th, 2019, and that will not change the time period. What it only changes is the additional amount. This particular grant, which is the Local Source Control Partnership, provide hands-on pollution prevention, advice, and regulatory assistance to businesses and other organizations to generate small quantities of dangerous waste by helping business owners to do their part. We also help prevent pollutant runoff from damaging Washington streams, rivers, and Puget Sound. And again, Patrick is here to answer any additional questions you may have on this particular grant.
You're asking us to accept more money?
Yeah, I read that like 4 times. Is that really the case? Do you have any other? Okay, go ahead, Gary.
I guess just because I'm the one stuck reading these motions, third line down on the action is contract number such and such for an additional funding of $40,000. Does that read right, or could it read contract number such and such for additional scratch out and for additional funding of $40,000?
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Huh?
Absolutely.
That's clear.
And it only needs board approval because it exceeds the 25% that would be allowed.
You have to talk into the mic, Patrick. I'm sorry, man. You have to introduce yourself and then state your point.
Good morning. I'm Patrick Soderberg. I'm the supervisor of the Solid and Hazardous Waste Group and in Public Health and Social Services. And the reason it's coming before the board to accept an additional $40,000 is because it exceeds the original contract of $120 by more than 25%, which would allow our director to sign it instead of the board.
Okay. I'm good with it.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick.
All right.
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good with getting.
I'm good.
Me too.
Well, at least your wait was worthwhile.
That's right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Then we get down to number 6, the commissioners and county managers items, and we can deal with that when we get there, unless you have any comments or questions about that now. And then we adjourn at 3:30. Well, we'll adjourn when we're done, but then we will convene the Board of Health meeting at 3:30 that date, March 12, 2019. That concludes March 12th BoCC agenda. Now we move on to proclamations and awards.
The only proclamation
Uh-huh.
La Bonita Bolmar, Clerk of the Board. The proclamation that I have ready today, we've already discussed. It's for Women's History Month, and I am working with staff on the proclamation, proposed proclamations for April. So that's the only one that I have at this time.
Should we add Robin to the Women's History Month, because you're mentioning that? Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
we can certainly have.
It's not history, though. It says,
Oh, it's not
it
history.
says she's the
Yeah,
one to
I'm
watch
not-
in
I'm not-
2019.
Oh, that's right.
Well, she's going to create history.
Although she might be part of the history in 2020.
Yeah, okay.
That's true, yeah. All right, go ahead.
So that's all that I have
But
for
certainly you
proclamations.
can ask her to be part of the picture this afternoon.
Okay.
That would be
Dr. Jackson.
nice. It'd be lovely. So
And all the women in the room.
You know what, and I'm sorry, you're on pause. I talked to staff about getting all of our staff here, and we discussed that at the break, as to the timing of the appropriateness, and we're just supporting all the leaders, female leadership in the county and workers and employees, that we could fill this room easily.
Yep.
Easily with the great women behind us all. So, well, we'll chat, all right.
So-
Play.
Clay, thank you. So that's all for proclamations at this time. Are you ready for boards and commissions?
All right, what about commissions, though? Is there anything about, advisory boards and commissions is next, here we go.
Yes. As you see in your packets, you have a reappointment, Casey Kramer, for the Storm and Surface Water Advisory Board. He's been a member since I'm losing my voice, since 2016.
Is he on for today? Is he on for today?
No, he's not on for an appointment. It's just informational only.
Okay.
You have time to review his application. He has an updated application in your packet. Also for Commissioner Edwards and Commissioner Hutchings. Commissioner Edwards, I did find Don DeHaan's application in our files. I looked back and it came to us in October. At the time that we received it, we did not have a vacancy in on the Planning Commission. And I will be making sure that Commissioner Hutchings receives that application today.
Thank you.
And that is a Planning Commission appointment, it's a Commissioner District appointment, and it's for Commissioner District number 1.
One question. It says here TST Advisory Committee, 2 vacancies. I thought we filled those, or are you projecting the 2 that we're creating?
No, we did fill those, and that just didn't end up coming off my list.
Okay.
And that's all that I have.
Go ahead, Jerry.
What about the civil service vacancy? I thought we filled that as well.
Let me get my form.
Yes, you did.
We did?
The report has not been updated. Yeah.
That is correct. This position also has been filled.
Have we, the Boundary Review Board, I don't recall having discussed that board before. There's a vacancy? How many people are on that? And
3.
we only have 2.
And we have alternates as well. But I don't believe we have a vacancy on the boundary.
I will check with staff on
Let me
that.
check. Maybe an alternate. I believe the boundary review board is full.
Maybe there's an alternate spot.
Maybe an alternate.
Yes.
We'll check what is the vacancy on that.
Or the alternate sitting in the seat until we appoint someone?
No,
I'm not
it's-
certain
it's-
how they
it's-
run.
It's 3 permanent and 3 alternate. So one of the vacancies could be one of the 3
Yeah,
alternates.
okay. The Casey Kramer, is that district specific? For the
That
storm and
is, as
surface
a
water?
I have it as a Commissioner District 2
Two.
position.
But it has to be from that district then?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else on
No, that's it.
commissions or boards? Go ahead.
Are we going to be making some appointments to any of these boards or commissions today?
I don't think so.
Nothing is pending.
Okay, good enough. That's all I want to know. Good.
Okay, next on the agenda item is briefing, public hearing decisions pending. Any?
None.
None. And legislative update, County Manager.
Yeah. In front of you, I have this brief report that I have prepared for you. And let me walk you through at least some of the bills they have passed, what we call the committees. And House Bill 1718, that's related to the funding flexibility for counties. As you may recall, that was the old House Bill 2006 last year. And that has been referred to the Rules Committee, so it's moving forward. Stop me if you want me to give you additional information.
Is that the one about the cost of living adjustment or the inflation index or whatever for the levy lid?
No, this is related to allow some flexibility in terms of how we assign to the Veterans Fund as well as through the public health related to the general fund, and also addresses some of the supplanting requirements that perhaps right now we have very narrow. It gives a little more latitude. It does not create additional revenue options, but allows for more flexibility within the options. Last year, I believe when we were looking at this bill and what the potential impact to the county will be, as I recall, it was close to $900,000 positive impact to the county if this bill moves through in the general fund. So this is a good bill. House Bill 1598 and Senate Bill 5522, this related to the annexations in the islands. This is the bill that Representative Dolio is sponsoring. And this is really addresses the concerns the county has in related to the annexations in islands, where is, in a nutshell, requires to have an interlocal agreement with the cities as to how we move forward in avoiding creating islands and dealing with islands. The companion bills, House Bill 1357 and Senate Bill 5249, that is the bill that it was introduced by the City of Lacey, which eliminates the 45-day referendum. At this point, I don't think it has any legs, and I don't think this bill is moving forward. House Bill 2022. This is related to the fish barrier removal funding. As you may recall, this bill allows for a partnership with individual property owners as to how we can partner in removing some of the fish barriers in private property. This bill has been referred to the Rules Committee. House Bill 5190, council-minded taxes for increased affordable housing. That has been already referred to rules. And that what it does is allows a council-minded action on the 1/10 of 1% related to affordable housing. House Bill 1497, you heard that early this morning, related to the foundational public health. And this also has been referred to the Rules Committee for a second review. House Bill 1771 and Companion Bill, Senate Bill 5683, related to the Welcome Washington Baby Act, that's related to the Nurse Family Partnership Program. This bill has been also referred to the Appropriations Committee. House Bill 1074 and Senate Bill 5057 raises the age to 21 to purchase tobacco and vaping products. And this already has been referred to the Senate Ways and Means Committee for a second reading. Senate House Bill 1087 and Senate Modified Bill 5331. This related to including a trust fund for health care for employees. That's part of their retirement, to give public employees an option as to how they can have a trust fund when they retire for related to public health. As you know, the county does not provide any health care benefits to retired employees. This will allow those employees to purchase into this trust fund, and at least the health care will be covered during retirement years. And this has been referred to the Health and Long-Term Care Committee for further review. Senate Bill 5163 and House Bill 1135, that's related to the wrongful death. This bill allows you for individuals seeking compensation for the wrongful death of when a local agency is considered to be in.
I need a little more information on that.
Is that the one, though, where surviving members can sue
Yeah.
on behalf of?
Okay, that's enough. I
No,
got it.
necessarily can seek compensation.
Right.
Because at this point.
For a non-dependent, just because there's a familial
Yeah,
relationship.
And I think this bill was related to the tragic event, as you may recall, last year when a family of three, two young parents and a young children, were traveling under a construction zone on a state highway, and one of the barriers on the construction zone just fell over their truck and killed all three of them.
Yeah.
The parents of one of the parents couldn't sue and seek compensation from the state. And this bill addresses that.
Okay.
It will have an impact to the county, and Washington State Association of Counties is opposed to that. But it's also very difficult to oppose some of the very tragic stories that some of the members have provided to the state legislators. So we'll see where it goes. It has been referred to appropriations and to the Rules Committee, I'm sorry. And so it continues on in the process. There are several bills related to local government infrastructure that is moving forward. Some related to bonding requirements for local governments, as well as there is a big bill that may include close to $10 billion, I believe, to local governments and related to infrastructure. The means of paying that is increasing the gas tax and also increases the fees for electric vehicles, which right now electric vehicles do not have any, they don't pay any fees. And as you know, as the motor pool of not just the state but across the county is changing, being more efficient vehicles, the gas tax has been reduced and the revenues related to that has been reduced as well. And some of the electric vehicles also don't pay gas taxes. But all those vehicles use the infrastructure and use the roads. So as we see the dimension in revenues on the traditional funding sources, this is an avenue as to how we can probably, the state gives the local governments some options to how we can address some of the larger projects. There's a lot of projects included in here. And this bill was related to Thurston County, is the I-5 corridor, and that is from Nisqually all the way south to Tumwater. This particular effort, as you know, is part of our legislative agenda. They were asking the legislature to continue to fund what we call is the environmental process, which is the NEPA and SEPA process, to determine what projects we need to do in the future. Anyways, that's a lot of infrastructure related bills. Any questions on that?
When you say electric car fees, do you mean like a fee on your registration yearly?
Right. That's what I believe it includes in the bill. House Bill 1591, Senate Bill 5644, this related to homelessness. And this is the bill proposes to decriminalize homelessness related to public facilities. This bill, what it does is it includes some harassment clauses that we cannot ask a homeless individual to vacate public buildings because that will consider to be harassment. And so this bill is intended to decriminalize that, as is stated on the bill.
And so what's the position on that?
I believe that has moved out of the committee the executive committee and is heading to rules for second reading.
So what's our position, though?
Our position is opposition.
Opposition. Yeah, okay, good.
Where are you at, 5644?
Yeah, it's a 5191 and 5644. Yeah, both.
Which
Right.
both say neutral next to
It
it.
says neutral rather than oppose.
Yeah, that was my suggestion, but I think you should probably oppose it.
Well, I was even, it was explained to me, and I haven't read it, but it was explained to me that even if you wanted to go up and hand a resource material to somebody that's homeless, that could be considered homeless, or it could be considered harassment.
Harassment, yeah.
I think it's, that we ought to take an active position, because that can become very disruptive to the public process.
Yeah, the reason that I put neutral last time, it was just to be cognizant of the larger effort that we're going through in addressing homelessness.
So it's a soft no.
But if
I want it to be a hard
if
no.
if you like to oppose, that's.
Well,
that's
I would
the
want, yeah, and I didn't mean to cut you off, I'm sorry, but I would want to hear exactly what the bill says and what the implications were. As was explained to me, and
I can give
it
you a
might be
copy.
accurate,
I
but
can-
if somebody's on our property, on the county property or on the city property, they could stay as long as they wanted. We
Would
can't
you
talk with them.
like me to give you a copy of the bill?
That would help, be
I would
helpful, yeah.
too,
Yeah.
Please.
To me, it's it's a far cry from criminalization to, which I frankly oppose, to saying that it's harassment to approach someone or ask someone to relocate or provide service. To me, there's a pretty big gap there.
Yeah.
And it sounds like this bill's going pretty far
Do
you have a copy of it?
I do want to use
have
those
one?
words, but yeah, you're absolutely
No,
right.
he's gonna give
I believe that this bill goes to, in my perspective, an extreme, because the definition of harassment includes just even a normal interaction with a homeless individual that will consider harassment.
Even
Which
social,
it
yeah.
created a very difficult way to manage, as it is a very complicated issue. You, the commissioner, currently working on that. Adding this law may not be helping us to address that issue more comprehensively. But I'll give you copies of
And
the
that bill's
bills.
advancing, though?
Yes.
1519 is sitting in appropriations.
Where's
1519.
It's 1591.
I'm sorry, 1519.
91 is in appropriations.
I'll give
You
copies of both.
skipped over the HB 1353, I think. There's three
The whole
together
list of
about
them, yeah.
housing. You went to the second and third, and there's one before that.
Oh, the
Affordable.
5739 and 5812?
Yes.
Yeah, they passed and they have been referred to second reading to the Rules Committee.
And that's not the same issue as yet next to.
No, this gives a little more latitude as local governments to address homelessness. So there's a lot of competing bills.
Yeah.
And I think as soon as it moves out of committee, I think I can give you a much better report as to what those bills really. Some may be consolidated as a result of referring to the committee. And I can't remember when the cutoff date is for the committee, but it should be coming up in a couple of weeks. House Bill 1386 and Senate Bill 5571. That's the military
Well, wait,
benefit.
did we skip 5644, or did you already address that one?
I
missed
already
it.
addressed that.
Okay, thank you.
House Bill 1386 and Senate Bill 5571. That's related to the military benefit zone. And that is something the county certainly can benefit from that. That is about 2 miles range that, within the military installations that we could get access to federal government for economic benefits zone. That certainly will benefit the city of Yelm to a great extent, but some areas of the unincorporated county will do as well. The opposed to that is the House Bill 1628, which imposes development restrictions within the same boundary. So it's somewhat of a yin and yang in terms of those two bills. And as you know, we have opposed this bill because it really puts some restrictions as to how you, the legislative authority, can make decisions as to how development can occur in the nearby the military installations.
And there's not a compensation piece in there.
There's not a compensation piece, and in fact creates a burden to local governments within the, I think this is a 5-mile radius of the military installation. The Department of Defense, according to this bill, needs to approve any type of land use decisions that you would like to make within those areas, which is not necessarily. I believe it takes away your legislative action within those areas.
It's not appropriate.
We opposed this bill last year, and we continue to oppose this bill.
Who's behind that position?
I believe it's the Fort Lewis. And this is, if I can give you the history last year as to how this bill came to be. When they go through exercises, they receive a lot of complaints. Okay, and a lot of complaints for residents who live within those boundaries of the base. And I think this is an attempt to address that so they don't have to deal with some of that controls on the density within the military installations.
I could support that if they had a compensation piece in there that we could use it for mitigation for HCP, for an example.
But I think if there was a compensation, it will not be related to the county. I think the compensation will be to property owners who will not be able
and they should be compensated.
To develop their lands. It will be, from my point of view, that will be an inverse condemnation by the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
My 2 cents worth.
All right, public records.
House Bill 1667 and Senate Bill 5667. Those relate to the public records reporting. You're tracking on this bill. 2 years ago, the legislature passed somewhat of a compensation of 10 cents per every gigabyte that we produce as part of the public records. I think it takes a lot more than 10 cents just to produce those documents, but also as part of the legislation imposed a very burdensome reporting requirements. And that this particular bills are attempting to address and ease the reporting requirements that each local jurisdiction will have to provide to the state on a yearly basis. So this is a good bill. So Senate Bill 5766 and House Bill 1743, that's related to prevailing wages. This is moving forward. Has been referred to rules, second reading. Last year, the legislature passed a bill that requires for all the residents development as well as shelter and homeless construction, all those projects needs to include prevailing wages. That really was not the intent of that particular legislation because it increases the cost of construction, and I think it defeats the purpose of building affordable housing across the state. Those two bills are attempting to fix that and exclude the residential shelter construction and as well as low-income construction. They will not be required to go with prevailing wages. We as a county, we have to go with prevailing wages no matter what. Yeah.
I'm looking at the second to the last page of this attachment, Romero, and towards the bottom it says housing. Well, it speaks to, it's not bolded, Senate Bill 5260, public hearing concerning powers to waive statutory obligations or limitations during state of emergency.
So you're moving ahead from my report.
Are you still going to go through all this? You're going page by page?
Yeah,
I apologize. Go ahead.
That's okay.
I will wait.
That's okay. One bill that is not in this summary is House Bill 1345. And this it just came to my attention this past week, and this is moving forward to committee. And what it does is the initial bill was an attempt to eliminate imposition of mandatory overtime for correction officers. That would have been a big impact to the county's jail operations. So this bill was modified, and this bill is moving forward in terms of requiring the Employment Security Department to request local governments data related as to how we assign mandatory overtime to correction officers. So, you know, I believe that always when we have data that support any type of decision-making process is always good. But again, when this bill came to be and I was looking a little bit of the history, it was very concerning because it will hamper the ability for the county to manage the overtime basis at the jail. So moving on, you also have a copy on your report, and this is a copy of the letter signed by many legislators, and that was a copy that Deborah Manguia drafted and secured the signatures supporting the court impact fees. And the court impact fees, you know, just for the public, we here in the Superior Court particularly receive many state cases. And that is just because of we are the convenience of the location being the capital city here in Olympia, and some of the state offices just filing cases here in Thurston County. The state used to compensate for that impact, for the additional cases that we tried. And back in 2017, they cut that by 50%. So the request that we have is twofold, is for the county to receive full compensation of this impact. In 2017 and 19 is $811,000, and the biennium for the next year is $2.1 million. Both are included on the supplemental budget, or the governor's supplemental budget for 2019, and also is included on the proposed 2020-2021 governor's budget. And I believe the three of you have been very proactive in making the case of the need with the respective legislators within our districts. And again, this letter is just an attempt to emphasize the need for us to receive that money. And again, that will be a positive impact to the general fund, because when we received the cut back in 2017, we have to make that up from the general fund balance, because there's no way that we can stop the services in processing those cases in Superior Court. Any questions on that letter?
We should see the budgets.
Yep, yeah.
Yeah, see if it made it.
So along your interactions, if I may, commissioners, with you, legislators within our districts, I will encourage you to continue to support this effort, because this is very extremely important for the county to receive what I call a just compensation for the services that we provide to the state. Yes, sir. Now you have questions on the next report.
Are you going to go through all the other pages, or is that it?
But go ahead.
In light of the FEMA training that you and I and Commissioner Ty Menser attended last week, that struck my attention, Senate Bill 5260, waiving statutory obligations or limitations during a state of emergency in order to cope with the emergency. And I think we talked about doing things along those lines, but I haven't read that and didn't know if you were up to speed on that at all.
No, I have not.
Okay.
No, no.
What's the significance of the final page, which just seems to be disconnected? It says at the bottom SSB 5812, and it's talking about ADUs and mainly ADUs. I haven't had a chance to review it.
Oh, this, yeah, yes, thank you. This is related to the land use and related to ADUs. And I just want to give you a framework as to what that bill is planning to do related to ADUs. I know that it's part of our comp plan amendment, and it's also part of the legislative process as to how we can accommodate ADUs, not just in the urban areas, also in the rural areas. And again, this is just a bulleted point as to some of the items this particular bill is planning to do. So thank you for highlighting that, Commissioner.
And an ADU is?
Accessory dwelling unit. Thank you.
All right, any other questions on the ledge report?
And lastly, House Bill 1209 and Senate Bill 5063 was related to prepaid ballots. That's for the auditor's office. That is moving forward to committee. And also the election costs. House Bill 1219 and Senate Bill 5073 also is moving to committee. There's not necessarily a county's bill, it's more a statewide bill as to how that will be. One is for the state to compensate for the prepaid ballots, and the other one is to fully compensate for on all the elections, because at this point the state compensates only on the even year election, general elections, not the uneven years. So that bill is trying to resolve that. And that concludes my report.
All right, thank you, sir. We're moving on then with the agenda. We're going to pause PIO and move to Nelson Ranch and Habitat. And you're involved in both of those? Yes, please, come to the table.
Allow me to frame the issue, Commissioners.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Staff will,
Nelson Ranch first.
yeah, back in 2014, the Board of County Commissioners, through the Conservation Future grant allocation cycle, allocated $500,000 for the purchase of Nelson Ranch. The Nelson Ranch is a 400-plus acres of farmland and prairie that was intended to have as a conservation easement. The project has an expiration date of December 31st, 2019, and the process of purchasing this property is moving forward. This particular request is for you to consider compensated just a little bit over $10,000 for administrative costs to the Capital Land Trust, which includes the administrative costs as well as the appraisal, billing, and other activities. So the staff is here to give you additional information.
All right.
Thank you for that overview, County Manager Chavez. Joshua Cummings, Director of Community Planning and Economic Development. Andy DeFobis to my left has got all the answers, but I want to make sure before he begins to relay that this is in response to the board's direction on how this process goes forward, and so this is Andy's work in following that process as laid out by the Board of County Commissioners. So I just wanted to say thank you to Andy for his good work in making sure that all of our T's are crossed and our I's are dotted. So from that, I'll pass the mic over to Andy.
Thanks, Josh. I think between the two of those introductions, that's essentially the item that's before you today. There is a request for funding. These requests are fairly routine, and they come through the board for authorization. So the project is moving forward. As far as I understand, everything's on target or can close by the end of the year, which is the expiration date. So this is really just a routine funding request, and I'll take any questions you may have.
Go ahead. Oh, yes.
So as a matter of clarification, the board has set aside the Conservation Futures, the grant process in the last 2 years, set aside to purchase land related to the Habitat Conservation Plan. This is not part of that because this allocation was back in the 2014 cycle, and that has already been set aside outside of the decision of the board for the HCP. It's just a point of clarification on this.
Okay.
No, I'm good. You're just looking for authorization to spend $10,000 to reimburse them, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm good.
You good?
Yeah.
Thumbs up.
Thank
Wow, that was quick.
Appreciate it.
Don't go anywhere. Don't you have the next one too? HCP?
Not me. I think that's Josh.
Okay.
Anthony.
Anthony. Okay. Thanks, Andy.
This is just a continued conversation. I'll provide you with an update as to how the Habitat Conservation Plan, the draft plan that we submitted to U.S. Fish and Wildlife, is moving forward. The last time you heard on this update, Josh Cummings and Cynthia Wilson were going to have a meeting with staff from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and they would like to provide a perspective as to how the meeting went, and that's really what.
Thank you again. We did meet with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the conversation is based around the two different items that we're working on, the HCP, the Habitat Conservation Plan. If we'll recall, back in July of 2018, our staff provided to the county commissioners approved, and we submitted to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service our draft Habitat Conservation Plan for addressing the different species in the Endangered Species Act here in Thurston County. Throughout these past few months, our staff has been working diligently with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on essentially kind of two tracks: the technical pieces of the draft that we submitted, and then also some of the items in regards to the funding question, which we commonly refer to as the 10% methodology. So we have two things have been happening. We've had the federal government has had some evolving perspectives on the way that the Endangered Species Act is interpreted. And then secondly, we have been working with our consultants and the technical staff with the local regional office on how we can address those different issues. And so the last meeting that we had, again, was very productive with Curtis Tanner and his staff in terms of the technical portion of it. And then on the funding side of it and the 10% methodology, they worked hard to understand how we got to that methodology. And the outcome of that was essentially what we're going to need from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is a formal letter stating what their actual concerns are, because we've kind of come to this impasse now after these few months of working back and forth. We've gone as far as we can in the staff to staff level discussions. Now we need to have that elevated to a formal conversation. So the expectation is we'll meet with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service one more time to kind of hammer out what they're not quite understanding on our HCP portions, and then they'll form a letter based on those gaps of understanding that they'll submit to the Board of County Commissioners. We'll then take that formal letter, and staff will work to provide a formal response as to what the Board of County Commissioners believes that we're addressing each one of those issues. So it's kind of a back and forth where we're still collegial, but not quite connecting all the way. And so it's going to require us being understanding that when we receive this formal letter to the Board of County Commissioners, that it's just another step in this process to complete the HCP in a way that is acceptable to the U.S. federal government.
Before we get into questions, I need a point of clarification. I'll use your word, but not in the proper context, I don't think. I want to understand the context. You said U.S. Fish and Wildlife has an evolving view or perspective. What does that mean?
So when we initially, it's about the way that we have captured the different species in terms of written into the HCP. So we had that whole guild concept where we lumped all of the species together in terms of their habitat. There is now some consideration that that should potentially be broken out into a species by species line item. And so we've been working with the federal government to understand what they specifically mean by breaking out the guilds and addressing them line by line.
And that evolution is happening nationally?
As far as we know, but we're experiencing it here locally.
Okay. Go ahead, Gary.
As we move forward with this negotiation, would you get a hold of our attorney, and I believe it was Elizabeth, that either threatened or took some action against U.S. Fish and Wildlife to obtain study information to verify on that 10%. And that had to do with information that they were withholding that had been gathered with our biologists, I guess. I don't remember all the particulars, but I believe she ended up having to write a letter to U.S. Fish and Wildlife threatening under the Freedom of Information Act to obtain that information. I'd just like to see that correspondence or an explanation of that piece of communication that took place, because I think it's going to play in here eventually.
See if I can clarify.
Yeah.
You are requesting to have a copy of what Elizabeth Petrich
Or-
submitted to U.S. Fish and Wildlife?
Or have her tell us about it.
Okay, okay.
Because I think that becomes pertinent as we move forward with the organization that claimed to be our partners in developing this problem, and they were the ones that were holding this information back. I never did figure out why.
No, I was just trying to clarify what you were looking for.
And I just don't want that to be lost as we move forward.
Yeah, we'll coordinate with Elizabeth as to what action she took.
Yes.
Maybe over a year ago.
It was.
Yeah, when we received that information.
All right, go ahead, Ty.
I just want to make sure I'm clear. The 10, what you've referred to as 10% methodology, I thought that related to the calculation of habitat that would need to be set aside. But you've referred to it a couple of times as the funding piece. So that's kind of confusing me.
So it's the, well, did you have a thought, Commissioner? I'm sorry.
No.
Okay.
I just want to make sure I understand what we're talking about.
So it's the amount of coverage directly relates to the amount of funding. So if you to cover 10% less, then it's tied to 10% reduction or 90% reduction in the funding.
Okay, but it
So
doesn't say
area
how it
times-
doesn't say how we would fund it. That's, I guess, where I'm getting confused.
So actually, that's a good point. And
There's a whole section of the HCP about that.
Yeah, and so I guess that's a kind of a shining spot on one of the successes of these conversations, is that the how was one of the questions that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had, and our staff was able to. They were concerned that we had in there all these things that weren't meeting the requirements. Our staff was able to show them within the lengthy document the 2 lines that stated exactly where the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service needed the grant to come from, the funding to come from, and they accepted that pretty well. So that was a kind of a good success out of these conversations. The way that we had it listed was, here's our base funding, and then here's some other stuff that we could do, and they had just kind of skipped over the here's our base funding. And once we were able to point that out, they were like, oh, the how is there. Good job. So that was successful. Thank you for addressing that.
Anything further? No. Anything else, Romero? Or
No,
Robin? All right, thank you.
Yeah, more to come.
And we'll come back routinely to give you an update on that.
All right.
Mr. Chair, could I make one comment on this topic?
Yes.
Just one comment, Commissioner?
Just one.
I should have said that, clarify that. Yeah, well, just one.
In regard to the individual species versus lumping them all together.
Guilds, yeah.
Guilds, okay. As Andrew moves forward on his project, which is the Nelson Ranch, I know that there is a piece of swamp property that's, there's a little piece of it that the Nelsons own, but there's quite a big swamp area there, right next to the Deschutes River. I don't think it's any good to anybody, but it might be good for spotted frog habitat at some point. I'd just like to at least pay attention to that. And we might be able to figure out an additional purchase from a different owner than Nelson's to give us some mitigation on that particular critter.
Good point. Good point.
Thank you. We'll have Cindy check in with Andy.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we're going to jump to Solid Waste Advisory Committee. Is that why you're here, Monica?
Yeah, she's both for the flex unit and the.
Oh, the flex unit. Okay, well, I wanted to go, I want to get you going here, since you're here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Which one you like to do first?
Let's do the flex unit.
And this is a brand new role for Monica Gorman as the interim director of Central Services. And the flex unit project, as you know, is an intent to add capacity to the existing jail. And to put this into context, there has been a lot of issues related to the current jail operations, related to housing inmates where in areas that perhaps they don't necessarily adequate for their confinement. And as a result of all that, the Disabilities Rights of Washington has submitted a few letters that we have correspond with the DRW as to how we need to address some of their concerns. because the initial letter threatened litigation against the county if we didn't meet some of the requirements. So we have made a lot of changes in coordination with the Sheriff's Office, particularly the Corrections Bureau, as to how we can probably address some of their concerns. Within the letter of somewhat of a commitment, the county sent with the board's signature, was included to adding capacity, because at that time we're in the process of, building the additional single cell units as part of what we call the flex unit. So when we began this project, we had an indication that perhaps we could probably build about 110 additional cells, and that cost for that was about $13 million. And your assistant county manager, budget director, gave you the option that perhaps the READ 1 was the option that you could consider to fund this particular bond measure. Also, on the initial conversations, was that perhaps the READ 1 capacity was giving us enough capacity above the $12 million range for the sales for us to perhaps consider building a courtroom as part of this expansion. Through that process, we hired a project manager, Brady Knowles, to help us conduct this project, and as well, we included, we hired a consultant. The consultant name is is 3 letters.
DLR.
DLR, thank you. As how we need to move forward.
That acronym, don't we need the name though?
It's a company name.
The DLR.
Oh, that is
the company
that's the
name.
company name.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
DLR.
Okay, good enough.
So as we are moving to this process, so we engage Superior Court and give us their perspective as to how much square footage we need for the new courtroom. So during the project development process, we met on a couple of occasions with the consultant, which started giving some parameters. The parameters was that, perhaps the building, the additional 110 beds, and the court room may not be within the means that we have to pay. So through the extent of we couldn't even build the 110 beds alone, to the extent that the only thing that we can build at this point perhaps will be 28 beds based on the allocated budget.
20, did you say?
Yeah.
No, that's changed in the last couple weeks.
That is changing. And the reason that we're providing you this update is we have asked the consultant to give us some information as to how they come up with these estimates, this level of magnitude. And that has raised concern, at least from our point of view, because we don't have the backup information to provide you with information that you need. So, and that goes back to, perhaps the issues related as to how this project is being managed, and perhaps how this project has been approached by the consultant. And I will let Monica to walk you through this piece of information that we have in here. It speaks about the different cost estimates. So the bottom line up front of this status is to put a pause on this project. And as part of the pause was considering whether the existing project management efforts are adequately addressed, which at this point that has been already being taken care of. Brady Knowles has submitted his resignation, and his last day is in a week, I believe.
Friday.
Friday. So that put us in the position to look as to how the next project manager should be, or who it should be. And also, what I asked the commissioners to give us time, at least 2.5 months, to put our hands around about the cost. Because as I'm struggling to give you the appropriate information as to where the cost estimates are coming from, that we are only now going to be able to build only 30 beds with no courtroom. I'm struggling to have this conversation with you because I don't have that information for you. And that is really the level of frustration that I have, and because that's not how I would like to conduct the business in front of you. So I do ask the commissioners, the commission, to give staff at least 2.5 months to try to put our hands around. So provide you come back with you with step by step as what are the options that you have. I will caution you, they do nothing is not an option. It really is not an option. They do nothing.
Got that.
Because we have the DRW just on the fence because it was a commitment for us to add additional capacity. So, but you need to make sure that you know what is it that we can build based on the available funding that we have related to the READ 1. So related to that, Commissioner Hutchins received a letter from the Sheriff's Office, which is attached to your packet. And I shared that with you a couple of days in advance. Hopefully you had the chance to read it. This is the letter from the sheriff.
That only came to me?
Yeah, okay. And I shared with
I see that, yeah.
your seatmates as well. It was a copy for me as well. You can read it if you haven't done so already. What he is urging the commission to build 105 to 120 beds plus a courtroom. Short room that will not be adequate from the sheriff's perspective. So anyway, so this is really what I want to have a conversation with you today related to this project. And again, Monica is going to walk you through this cost estimates. We do not have all the information that perhaps you may need. And we ask to give us at least 2.5 months to put our hands around and come back with some solutions down the road. Did I cover all the bases?
Thank you.
I appreciate where you're coming from. Like you say, you have just enough that frustrates you. That's not your work ethic. That's why it frustrates you. You don't have the information to give the board. But you have just enough information to get us frustrated, perhaps and concerned. But I have no qualms in waiting because it's better be done right. And we already expressed our interest and desire to DRW to do it right. So doing nothing, you're right, is not an option. I'm sure everybody's going to weigh in here.
Well, no,
Each
I
of
mean,
you.
I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. We're going from 13 million to up around 50 million?
So I can walk
In the
through.
estimate?
I can walk through this table with you. So what has
Hey,
been?
before you start, Monica,
Sure.
I want Ty to weigh in too.
Before you do that,
Yes.
this memo has been pulled, is that my understanding? Because their numbers are, there was a briefing memo that was posted in our thing a couple weeks ago.
And that briefing was intended to give you an update.
And we had a cancellation.
When I read the briefing, there was additional information that I was not satisfied. It was available. So I canceled the briefing.
Okay.
Because I wasn't going to put staff and myself in front of you without having all that information that you need to make an informed decision. So that briefing was canceled. It has not been rescheduled, and we're asking to give us the opportunity to regroup. Really, that at this point we need to regroup. We need to push the pause button on this.
Okay. One other question. So when you said there was a capacity commitment to disability rights of Washington, I understood. I would need more information. I understood there's a flexibility need, but if there's been a commitment to actually create more beds, that's news to me.
No, it was part of the letter that we submitted to Disability Rights of Washington as a result of the different correspondence. I can probably give you a copy of that. And obviously you were not part of the letter. That was part of the past commission. Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I don't know as we need a briefing on this whole thing at this particular time, on these discrepancies. I don't think we have time to do it, first of all, for now. But I guess as we hit that pause button and move forward, considering the disabilities group that's kind of hanging in the winds, if you will, and what this body has already decided somewhat about development of a court complex, you know, that's taking place, I would like to, as you look at this, and when we talk close to $50 million, if that's, I mean, I'm just kind of,
Please don't react to those
Yeah,
numbers.
yeah, okay.
Because
Yeah.
we don't have the bucket
But
information to support
what I'm
any of
wondering
that.
about, we've got 80 empty beds over at the juvenile facility, and if we had to rent 10 beds elsewhere at the Holiday Inn or something for those juveniles, so we could utilize those 90 empty beds, say for, just put all females in there for an example, I don't know. I would at least like to explore the possibilities of utilizing all of those empty beds to help us solve a problem here, because this problem kind of looks out of control to me. All I'm asking is if we took the juveniles out, then we don't have the mix of juveniles, adults, males, females, all that, and we could possibly utilize those 90 beds for not much of a cost. I know we would have to do something with the 10 juveniles that we've got. If we've got to do a little transportation or do something to alleviate this problem we have to keep us from being involved in litigation, I think we need to at least explore that as part of our option.
Go ahead, Robin.
If the price tag is 50,000 or 50 million, we can't afford it.
I know you. I know we can.
We can't afford that.
Right.
So we won't be doing any $50 million projects.
I realize that, but without getting into the nitty gritty of that 50 million, that number is crazy. But we've got 90 potentially empty beds in a facility that the county owns.
And, yeah, and they know that.
And we need to look at utilizing those. I cannot envision going to the taxpayers and asking for any money. Well, we've got that kind of, I don't know if you want to call it incompetence or disregard for the taxpayers, but we cannot move forward without taking that into consideration.
And we don't have enough information yet on
to
this.
even get into a discussion at this point.
So I want to be respectful of your time, Monica, too. And would a briefing on this still be of assistance to us at all?
In 2.5 months.
What?
In 2.5 months, that's what I'm requesting.
Right,
Because
right.
a
But
briefing-
Monica's here to brief on something
No,
now.
it's just to walk you through the numbers, that's all it is.
Okay, and that'll be a benefit to us, you reckon?
I think
Or to the public?
what we're trying to communicate to you is this is the information that we have now.
Uh-huh.
So the consultant has costed out 5 different options. Option number 1 is the sheriff's desired option. Most of these options are either not feasible or clearly over budget. And so what we are asking for you, as Ramiro stated, is a pause so that we can revisit with this consultant and better understand what's behind these numbers.
I'm good with the pause, and I've read this spreadsheet, and I've read the memo. We need to be walked through it.
No, I don't think we do either at this
I would
point.
my only comment is that the sheriff's letter, since we're getting that now, it doesn't correctly state the positions of certain entities in the letter that he's represented their positions, so be mindful of that we're going to need input from the prosecutor's office and Office of Public Defense and the clerk.
Right.
'Cause
Or
I
even
don't-
his own position.
Yeah, it states his own
I've heard this for
position
the
is
first
his own
time.
position, but it was just a coincidence that I'd had conversations with the Mr. Thunheim and Mr. O'Connor who didn't believe that there was a need for, I don't want to speak for them, but
yeah.
They may not believe at this point, it might have been a previous position, but at this point in time, they don't necessarily believe we need a courtroom. So I just wanted, since this letter is going to be sitting on our desks for 2.5 months, I want people to just keep an open mind about what the options are and what the different parts of our law and justice system might need and ask.
Yeah,
That's all I'm
and
asking.
thank you, Commissioner, because at the end of the journey, you may be perhaps considering the position to build what we can afford.
Right.
And that's going to be the bottom line.
All right, go ahead.
I'd like to go back to Commissioner Edwards' position. So you may recall when I think you were here, maybe not, the option of the juvenile facility, we costed out at some point how much it's going to be in some of the briefings. It was significant.
Okay, let me just interject something in here on that, because that's what you're talking about, but under that scenario, they were going to retain juveniles there and put some kind of a barrier for sound, sight, all that, which was not feasible in the long run. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just asking that as we look at this for the next couple of months or whatever it's going to take, we look at vacating all the juveniles out of there completely and utilizing those 90 beds. I cannot imagine going to the taxpayers
So
and asking for money.
we may not be able to have that information in 2 months because from my personal point of view, you cannot just vacate the juveniles and put adults without retrofitting that existing facility. And also, please remember the juvenile facility includes the courts for juveniles and other services.
I realize that.
So, so I just want to make sure that the staff doesn't walk away with some expectations that perhaps we are not able to meet.
I'm going to ask my other board members if they agree with me. I mean, if I am the only one that has this concern, then I guess it's a moot point. But if the other board members agree that we need to explore this, then that becomes direction from this board to yourself and staff.
And it may require more time then to get to the answers that you're looking
Well,
for.
all I'm asking is that we take that into consideration and we do it starting now, because this county does not have a good track record with the taxpayers' money. I'll just be real blunt about it.
So let me ask you, seatmate, are you interested in having a committee or someone look at juvie?
Yes, because I agree what Commissioner Edwards said. What I've heard before was a conception of trying to have both populations in there simultaneously.
Yeah, that ain't gonna work.
And that's not what he's talking about.
Right.
I get asked all the time about the jail that we have underneath this complex and the empty beds in the juvenile complex. And likely there's an answer to that, and it's too cost prohibitive. But I need to have that. I think we need to have that answer, at least kind of we need to kind of know. I need to be able to tell taxpayers this is the reasons we can't do that, and I don't necessarily have that information right now, and that puts us in a difficult position.
That's all I'm asking for, is that this board give direction to explore some different options as you move forward and scrutinize these numbers, I guess, because I think it's crazy. I mean, if we had to build a motel out by the freeway and put bars on the windows and keep 10 kids out there, I don't know what the answer is. But I know this is not the answer, and the taxpayers are not going to be happy about this. We had a building sit over there for 5 years that was empty after it was built.
So do you have what you need?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, that's all I'm asking.
And you have 3 thumbs up for that. Got it. Thank you, Monica. Next, let's go to the PIO update. Is that all right? I want some happy stuff.
And Monica, please don't take this as a frustration, with you or anything. We're just...
No, not with you at all.
It's about the
yeah,
work.
I don't want you to go away here thinking we're upset with you.
Thank you, Monica.
Sally Forth, thank you. Happy news.
Good morning.
I thought you were going to utilize Monica's time because she's also part here of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee letter.
Oh, please come up. For which one?
Item number 4.
Solid waste.
Oh, so it is solid waste. Yes, thank you, Monica. Pause. Give us some happy news about solid waste.
Well, not necessarily for happy news. This is a memo that all of you receive from the Chair and Vice Chair of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, highlighting some of issues. And I can probably walk you through those and give you just my perspective and my concerns and my point of view.
This isn't happy.
Sorry.
On the I think it's in the 4th paragraph, talks about the changing and leadership 2 years ago. That's in reference to Monica coming as the solid waste manager. It's a little bit interesting because as I take this particular comment with Mr. Michael Stedman, the chair who just joined the group, making the statements of experience that happened before he came into the advisory board, it seems concerning to me.
I guess I don't even know, when did that individual get started on the board?
I think he just was assigned maybe a couple months ago.
As chair.
Yes, Chair. So, secondly,
Was he on the board before that?
Was he
or
on
just
there
became
before that?
chair? Or just joined the board altogether?
I can't answer that. I don't have that information in front of me.
So I just give you my perspective on this. Also, then start on the items the chair and vice chair highlighted, the decision to dramatically change the options available to the City of Olympia Organics diversion program. That is more to the story. And as Commissioner Hutchins and Commissioner Edwards were part of those briefings last year, when the issue really is the organics were contaminated. What the City of Olympia was bringing to the Waste and Recovery Center, which we ended up having to pay a lot of money just to separate the contaminants from the organics. So we asked the City of Olympia to take a proactive action just to help us to manage the contaminants. And on the second page, and this is even the most concerning to me, and it's related to the request for proposals in the procurement process. I believe that is a function of the county, and that is an administrative function and legislative function that you have as a Board of County Commissioners. They're making the argument that perhaps this should be processed by the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, this RFP, and it is concerning to me because one of the members on the Solid Waste Advisory Committee is one of those individuals that could benefit, or their company could benefit from the procurement process they might go through it. So having a vetting process of a procurement process that include an individual that perhaps benefit from that is concerning to me.
Where does it, Mayor, where does it say that they're proposing that I didn't catch that when I first read it. You're saying that they're proposing that they vet the procurement process?
They were concerned that the staff didn't vet the RFP process they were in the process of conducting through the Solid Waste Advisory Committee.
And I'm asking where in the letter does it say that?
Yeah, first page of the second page, both of these decisions are troubling, but the last one especially concerning because the very little information was given to the BoCC by staff regarding the changes. That is concerning because none of the advisory board members were part of those briefings. Based on the limited information, the decision was made to move forward with the possible RFP. The SWAC was not consulted on this topic because they're requesting for the county to consult with the SWAC the RFP, a procurement process that is truly the county's purview and your purview as a legislative authority. And if we go down to this memo, making a reference of how much money we could probably save, whether we go with option 1, option 2, making a comment right here in item C, Republic Services is currently charging the county $53.86 to $56.82, and making the argument to extend the existing contract that benefits Republic at this point is concerning to me. So anyway, so I just want to give you my perspective of the concerns that I have from this memo. And I do believe that at this point, my point of view, they're stepping out of the boundaries as to what the Solid Waste Advisory Committee activity should be.
Go ahead, Gary.
Okay, I would just like to point out, because I'm referred to in here, that this was my first meeting that I went to as the representative of this board, and I'm sure I did say something to the effect that we want to get it right, because that's a stance I always take in public policy. Let's do our homework, let's get it right. So as far as me being knowledgeable enough to comment on that, I made it perfectly clear to that group that I was brand new, and matter of fact, I didn't say anything during that whole meeting other than listen until it got to one point. I pretty much had to say, well, let's be careful, you know, let's get it right. And anyway, so I don't know, I just wanted to clarify that.
You picked a good one.
Yeah.
So and also making a reference of the cost per ton in terms of the disposal. The RFP that you give direction to conduct includes more than just the disposal. It's the collection, the transfer activities on the work, as well as transportation and disposal. So making a suggestion just on one aspect of the contract may not be the total value that we can seek from this request for proposals. And during the conversation of the request for proposals, we spent, particularly, you know, the two remaining commissioners, close to 7 months on this conversation. And the conversation was, what is the best possible way that we can get the best possible proposal to benefit the county as well as the citizens. And the request for proposal is an open competitive process that any potential vendor can provide all the services that we're looking for. The work is, as you know, is 90% already privatized. There is only 10% which we manage the inspections of the site, as well as we man the tickets coming in and out of the site. So and again, the RFP is not just about how much it's going to cost us for the disposal at the end of the process. Our request for proposals includes, again, the collection, the processing of the waste recovery center, the transportation, and the disposal. So it's all at once. That's the RFP process that includes. So anyways, that was my perspective on this.
Comment or question?
Well, my comments are, I read this letter a little differently. I didn't, you know, saying that the SWAC was not consulted, I didn't take that as them trying to say that they should be the ones to do it. They're an advisory board. They're giving advice as what they're supposed to do on what's really a complex subject. So I didn't take that as sort of usurping the county's authority, legislative authority. The folks that signed this, I mean, you got a Democrat and a Republican, and their former elected official and a former elected official. Ms. Sinclair, I've worked with on the Transportation Policy Board, and Mr. Stedman I've known. Those are pretty, you know, those are, to me, that's what the advisory board is for, is to give input on complex issues. This issue about I wouldn't know about the issue, I wouldn't know anything about this issue of the Cowlitz landfill, except that in the WASAC training that I went to in December, sorry about that, the Cowlitz County Commissioner that was involved in this whole thing, he was one of our speakers in one of the panels, and the speakers were asked to talk about a difficult public issue that they had to tangle with, and he used this example of their landfill as his example. So he went into great detail of all the ins and outs, and so I can sort of, it kind of corroborates what is in here, is that there is a very distinct possibility that in, like, I think June of 2020, this landfill would be privatized and be available, which would massively, as I understand it, reduce transportation costs. And so there is a risk to us, you know, entering into law. This is all really complex, and I don't purport to understand it to the nth degree, but I guess I'm not as dismissive of this letter as Ramiro seems to be, because I know the people who signed it. I know it's complex. There's certain information in here that I can corroborate from Luke from Cowlitz County Commissioner, and it could be a massive amount of money that for our Thurston County ratepayers. So I want to be very careful about this and how we approach it, and I think we should take the issues raised seriously, regardless of whether the SWAC is overstepping its bounds, as you say. We should look at the substance. Because it could be really important.
So I apologize if I come across dismissive.
I was going to say I didn't agree with that.
I was just providing my perspective from the administrative point of view on how I read the letter. So if I came dismissive, please accept my apology, because that is not my intent.
Fair enough.
And lastly, they do recommend for you to stop the RFP process, which that is the bottom line concern that I have about this letter.
Yeah, and not in your defense, but just knowing you the last 2 years, had I thought you were dismissive, I might not have even seen this letter. You would have dismissed it, but you brought it as a concern because they very well may be overstepping a bound, or may not be, but at least you brought it to our attention, and I appreciate that. But the question is, for me right now, since we're going to go through the process that we are, is how, and what kind of response are we going to give SWAC to this letter?
My suggestion was going to prepare a letter saying thank you for your comments in so many different words.
And does it come from the board?
But it's your prerogative. That's my suggestion.
Right. Is something under our signature?
Yeah, because it was addressed to you.
Okay.
But I mean, whether you want to do something different, what I'm providing you is just my perspective from the administrative point of view.
Right.
That doesn't mean that I'm in the position to dictate how the board needs to address any particular comments that you receive from any citizen or any group. This is within your purview. The information you presented to you, whether you like to take any particular actions within the suggestions, the staff is here to follow up your direction.
Can we ask for Monica's input?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think there are a couple concerns Ramiro and I share, and I have a slightly different perspective. Every person on this SWAC is a volunteer. And so their point of view, while I may not agree with it for one reason or another, is important. However, this was not a matter that was brought before the SWAC. So this was not an issue that was brought up, nor was it discussed. So had someone, any member, had questions about Cowicks County, we could have had that discussion. Cowicks County last year was in negotiation with Republic Services. And even though it's not stated in this letter, if the county were just to stop the RFP and potentially wait for Cowicks County, Cowicks has identified Republic as the vendor that it was going to negotiate with. And because that process became so contentious, they ended those negotiations in November of last year. That said, from my perspective, this is a procurement, and it's probably the largest procurement this county will do. It represents about $14 to $15 million annually, probably over a 10-year period. That is a massive contract, and there are procurement rules and standards, including standards in this county and embedded in law. Competitive procurement is how we do this kind of purchase. There are probably 2 to 3 different vendors who would be interested in this process, and I think what this letter does is jumps ahead. And this letter essentially says, instead of going through a competitive process, you should just wait, or you should give this to somebody else. And if, in fact, we go through this competitive procurement, as this board has approved, and Republics can, at any time as part of that process, identify this landfill as an option. So that's part of the request for a proposal. So they could propose that as an option. So it doesn't eliminate the process that you've approved, does not eliminate this as an option in the future.
Monica, you started off by saying this was not brought before the entire SWAC.
That's right.
But I'm looking at one of the paragraphs on the first page, and it says, our last meeting, the committee's volunteer leadership had a conversation, felt it important to communicate to the commissioners. While these thoughts may not reflect the views of the entire committee based on concerns shared by the majority of the members. So they had discussed it, or you don't know, or they haven't?
I was not at the last meeting, but I had staff at the last meeting, and I asked them to listen back to the minutes.
Okay.
And there was no discussion about Republic Services or Cowicks County or the RFP at that meeting.
Okay.
And I was at that meeting, and I don't recall any of that discussion. Now, I did get there about 5 minutes late. So if it could have happened in the first 5 minutes, but I don't think so. So.
Okay. So questions?
Well, no, I mean, I just go back to my original statement. I want to get it right for the taxpayers. So
yeah.
I don't know enough about this, even to comment, and I know we're all going to have to look into it.
And I can
And
concern myself with conflict of interest.
I'm looking forward to Monica's input and our county manager's.
And I'm glad we have one of us sitting on that committee that can,
Yeah.
you'll get up to speed and you can.
Yeah, at some point I
give us the
will, yes,
lowdown.
sir.
Yeah.
So I do ask the commission, what you would like to do with
And the
this amendment?
response.
And the response really comes down to, the request is, it's recommended the Board of County Commissioners do nothing at this point related to the RFP. In the RFP, you already, the board gave direction to staff, and we're moving forward on developing the specifications of the RFP. The question that I have is, do you want to stop that process as a result of this letter?
I don't.
I do, I'd like to comment on a potential letter that you might put together for us. I would like to thank them for their input, and we will take that information into consideration as we move forward with this very complicated issue.
Yeah.
Something like that.
That's in the response, that's what I would like, something like that. But
unless legal counsel has a better idea.
You're asking, do we want to postpone the RFP based on this information?
Because that
Right.
that is the request of this letter.
No.
All right. Is that thumbs down? No?
I do not want to stop our process.
Yeah, I don't really want to take action at this point. There's complexities I don't know the ins and outs of to make that decision.
What about returning a letter to them, at least addressing their, they corresponded? We'll correspond back.
I need some direction from the board, whether you're considering stopping the RFP process or not.
Okay, I am not.
Because that's the
I
gist
am
of the
not.
letter. And obviously, the letter will have more than just,
Yeah.
That's what I'm
I
asking
guess I'm
direction.
considering it.
Yeah.
It's among the options that I haven't decided on, and I don't necessarily know if this letter needs a response. I mean, they gave us advice, and we're discussing that advice, and we will continue to do that.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, but in my opinion, in the absence of no response, they fill in they fill in the blanks, and generally it's not always the most favorable. But I'm in favor of responding, saying thank you very much. We read it. Thank you very much for being a part of this.
And
It's
it'll
an
be
extremely complex issue.
Yeah, I'm happy if you want to just put a letter that says, just really generically, thank you for the input. We're considering the information that you've submitted.
Yeah. Very good.
That's-
I'll bring something to your attention. Thank you.
But you got the vote on the postponement, no?
Well, is that, I mean, the
You
conversation
have two
was
no's
in the
and a
middle.
neutral.
Okay, thank you.
If that's stating your position, okay.
Fair enough.
Now, Monica, before you leave, are you on here anywhere else?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much for ping-ponging.
I'm hoping you can move on to happy things. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, PIOs. Make us smile.
Good morning again for 8 more seconds.
Yeah. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So I have quite a few things to update on, so I'll try and make it quick. I also spent last week at the FEMA disaster recovery training, and I have a couple takeaways that I'm going to start working on. There's a need to develop a transition plan from PIO response at the ECC activation level to PIO recovery. This is particularly pertinent to Brian and I because we are the PIOs for the ECC activation. So we would want to make sure that if we moved into a recovery position, that the transition would be smooth, and even from the response aspect, we want to make sure the transition is smooth. And then a need to work more closely with other communicators in the region to form those relationships and plan communication responses. In response to that, I'm going to be doing a TAP-in, which is the Thurston Area PIO Emergency Network. I did not create the name, I just administer the program. We're going to be meeting at the end of this month, and I've invited a few of the other PIOs that are part of that group to come and talk about our experience last week and begin those discussions on the response recovery aspect from a communications perspective. And so I think it's going to be a good conversation to really start building on. And then we talked about the snow coverage earlier, and I just kind of wanted to give a shout out to the communications staff. So even though the website was down, which is kind of our main means of communication, the communication staff at Public Works, which is April Lee and Catherine Brenner, and emergency services, which is Vivian Eason and James Yates. And then your public information staff, Brian and I, were very active in supplying the community with information through social media and media response. We had multiple very positive news segments about it. It was all very positive for Thurston County. Between Public Works, Emergency Management, and your county social media platforms, we posted more than 200 times during that period, providing updates on county response, education, and sharing information from like the Northwest Weather Services, Intercity Transit, and WSDOT. That number does not include the comments or questions that we received or Facebook messages that we received. We did get 662 new likes on the county Facebook page during that time, which is great, and 150 new followers on the Twitter feed. Rick Thomas and I have been working with the TAS, or Thomas Architecture Studios team, and Stuart Elway to develop a survey on the citizens' perspective for a need of a new courthouse. There's a really good draft right now that's currently with legal for review. We expect that survey to begin next week. Elway will be reaching out to citizens via telephone survey, looking for 500 responses, and selecting individuals to participate in an online survey. The survey is not being conducted by the county. Elway will be administering the survey and providing the county with a report on the findings. So just wanted to make sure that that was clear. The TC Media Governing Board, which I am a member of, while I was at training last week, they voted me in to be the secretary. So, so now I'm on the executive board for TC Media. And then yesterday I met with yesterday I met with Teresa Reed, who is the fair coordinating the fair coordinator, to start discussions about outreach around the fair. It's kind of more of an advantage this year because she is now a temporary position that serves year round, so we could start talking about that earlier than we usually do.
She needs a new title, though, I'm sorry.
Fair coordinator.
Fair coordinator, yeah.
Josh,
Didn't do her justice.
And then just so that our citizens know, the fair this year is July 31st through August 4th. More to come on that, but just wanted to give a little brief update. Any questions on any of that?
No. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. To piggyback off of Megan on social media, today, right now, we currently have 5,705 followers on Facebook, 5,206 followers on Twitter, 139 subscribers on YouTube, and 1,124 followers on Instagram. That's a total of 12,174 followers across all platforms. It's about an increase of about 1,700 since January. So we've had good growth there. And then just a couple quick updates. I'll be briefing the communications plan, our 2019-2020 communications plan, to the board tomorrow morning, seeking approval for that. And the first part of the March Thurston County Connection is scheduled to go out Friday. If not Friday, it'll go out early next week. That's Commissioner Menzer's episode on the Nisqually Watershed Plan. And then next up for our Thurston County Connection is Commissioner Edwards. So I'll be working with his office on getting a topic and getting a taping time scheduled. And then also, this month is Women's History Month. We'll be spotlighting employees on Facebook and Twitter throughout the month. So be on the lookout for those. Pending any questions I'll have.
No questions.
Nope. No. Thank you. Thank you very much. Happy face. All right. So from PIO, now we're going to the homeless regional response.
Yeah, it's Commissioner Menzer asked me to follow up on the planning session that you had.
Okay.
So the steps we have taken, and as a result of that, one of the.
I'm wondering why staff's here.
Yeah, is going to answer it.
Okay, perfect then. Thank you.
So it was two aspects of main topics. It was the emergency resolution, similar to what the City of Olympia has passed.
Mm-hmm.
The staff has already been in touch with the City of Olympia. We have there's additional questions on that resolution. This is an emergency resolution that requires a public hearing. So at this point,
How do you have an emergency and make it wait until you have a
No,
public
no,
hearing?
because you stepping outside of the code. And because by stepping outside of the code, under that emergency, you require that ordinance to be, have a public hearing. So we're hoping to bring to your attention for you to set the public hearing in the next 2 weeks. And at that point, we'll have that ordinance in place that actually applies to the county.
Okay.
Also, I have already scheduled periodic meetings with Shelley Slater and Keely Murnu. And the intent is for Keely to start taking the leadership on some of the aspects. Parallel to this resolution, we're going to be looking at the pros and cons of potential mitigation sites that the county can have. And at this point, we have, at least from my point of view, at this point, we have 2 sites. Is one on the Madman area, across from the jail, and the other one is the intersection of Martin Way and Carpenter Road. And that is an association. The city of Olympia owns the frontage of this property, and the county owns the backside. So the approach is moving forward with this resolution that allows for those usage to be, to be part of those sites. And also I'll be working with Shelley again and Keely to develop pros and cons of each of those properties. And we'll bring those to your attention when we get to that point. That is the update, and the staff is here to give you additional details on that resolution if you have questions.
Come on up here. So we'll be relatively quick here. Thank you for that introduction, County Manager Chavez. So what we understand from CPED is that this is obviously an important issue. So we have shifted our resources. One of our staff members, Ian Leftcourt, has been working on the economic development chapter of the comprehensive plan, but we've moved him into trying to address this emergency ordinance that we received from the City of Olympia. It does take in concept the spirit of that ordinance and applies it to our code. Our code is obviously somewhat different. So we are working to follow the process appropriately to engage with our citizens in the same way that the City of Olympia has done. But I had handed over to Jeremy, who's still in this transitional role. If you remember, he's now the operations manager, but he's got some of the best chops in how to make these ordinances go through the process appropriately, and he's guiding Ian in that work. So I'll hand it over to Jeremy.
Right, good morning, Board. Jeremy Davis, Community CPED Operations Manager. So what we've been looking at to address the issues that we found out in the planning session with our current emergency homeless encampment regulations that we have now, and comparing that with what the City of Olympia now has on the books with their regulations, we would be looking to add a provision in there. It's basically essentially a waiver provision to our homeless encampment code that would then allow the director to possibly waive some of those health and safety provisions if the Board of County Commissioners declares a homeless crisis, which you've already done that, I believe, last summer. So in those limited circumstances, and the director would then have to work with our public safety officials, the Sheriff's Office, Fire Department, and Public Health to make sure that whatever provisions we do put in place for that encampment will meet their needs. So that's in a nutshell what we'd be doing. What the City of Olympia did last summer is essentially that. Last June they adopted an interim regulation under the Growth Management Act to add that waiver provision to their code, and then they came back in the back end and enacted permanent regulations as a follow-up that basically put those on the books permanently.
So talk about process.
So process with interim regulations. Under the Growth Management Act, the board can actually adopt an interim regulation or emergency ordinance at any time. The requirement is that you then hold a public hearing within 60 days of that adoption. So Ian is working on an interim ordinance for you to look at, and you can consider either adopting on that day at your direction, or consider adopting it following a public hearing on a subsequent date. Ian is also working with your clerk to find an appropriate hearing date for you. So we're working on the draft interim right now. We're going to get that to county legal, who then have to review it for form and correctness, and then we'll bring that to you, I believe, on March 19th at the agenda setting meeting.
Yeah.
And they can adopt it at that time.
Yes.
Okay.
Wait, no, go ahead.
No, I won't start.
I guess my only question is, is this going to be a complicated ordinance that we're only going to get 10 minutes to review or something? I mean, or do we need a separate work session?
Whatever you like, and obviously, if you don't feel comfortable with the information that's being presented to you, we can always schedule a longer.
Okay, I just, just because I haven't reviewed anything on it, so.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
And board is operating at the, excuse me, CPED is operating at the direction of the board to emulate what the city of Olympia has done. So everything that Jeremy just said is emulating what Olympia has done as directed.
What kind of foreshadowing can you give us about which regulations we might be altering or suspending or whatever?
Well, in our current emergency homeless encampment regulations, we have requirements for neighborhood meetings, restrictions on knives, I think sex offender registration, and other checks that have to occur for residents, and other site characteristics that they have to meet. So with this emergency waiver, we'd be looking at picking some of those and possibly waiving some of those requirements so we can make sure to get the homeless encampment in an expedited fashion while still taking notice of what the neighborhood is and where the sites are located and our communications with the neighboring residents.
And the sites would be tents, or are they going to be tiny houses, or are they going to be what?
The current regulations, I think, have tents in there. I don't think that we would necessarily restrict it to tents, or we could work with, massage our regulations to accommodate tiny houses too. So I think
that some of the regulation changes might be setbacks or wetland, all that kind of buffer zones, all that?
We have setback restrictions, and we still have to protect critical areas under our critical areas ordinance, even if we permit a temporary use of a site and or take it into account endangered species listed under the Federal Endangered Species Act. So.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. You answer.
I guess when you say you're following kind of what Olympia is doing, basically, I'm very concerned about that because I don't think they've been doing the right thing. I make no bones about it. One of the things I'm very concerned about is that we identify anybody, we positively identify anybody that might be staying in one of these camps. I'm particularly concerned about sex offenders. And I do not want to be associated with a camp that allows sex offenders to live there that we don't know about, and now we get a horrendous case developed because of something like that. So that is a big concern of mine. And I think as we find out who these people are and where they're from, criminal records and such, I think that is all being responsible to the community in which they might be residing. So.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I mean, the things that you identified weren't the exact list of what I remember. We had the memo from the Olympia's legal counsel showing where the conflicts were, and I thought it were things like how long people could stay, the number of people that could stay on a particular site. It was a little more just structural. I didn't remember
I
the
didn't
knives and the sex offenders and the more
I didn't want
involved.
to go through all of the particulars of it. The waiver would cover, it would be all inclusive of all of our limitations in that chapter, with the exception of what the commissioners say don't include.
Okay, got it.
There, good. So it's a suite. And so when we come back to you on March 19th, correct? We'll have the whole umbrella, and then the commissioners will hear the different items, and then you'll pick and choose which ones you'd like to not have included in the emergency waiver. But that's why this issue is complicated. It's got a lot of moving parts to it.
Be like a buffet.
Do you guys address, I mean, I know this is an issue with the national government too, like you declare an emergency and it's just like never undeclared. I mean, we declared a homeless emergency in June, so that just keeps going and we're allowed to then waive, because you're saying there'll be a trigger, right, under certain conditions like an emergency. I'm just wondering if there's any time limits on that.
I think that's for the county manager.
There's not a time limit on that, and I think it's the roles, because the emergency was declared by the Board of Health, and you as Board County Commissioners, legislative authority, have oversight of the code, and that's when we go through this process. But it doesn't have a sunset date in terms of emergency law.
I'm just curious. I know that's normal, but thanks, guys.
So it might be the standard practice. Maybe it's not normal, though.
Yeah. Well, you've seen it, like they showed on TV, how many national emergencies are still there, and it's like a bunch of them. And it's the same, we don't ever go back, in 3 years and say, we're going to undeclare an emergency. I mean, it's just, people don't do it that way.
Because the issue is so complex, I think the point where you will consider undeclared emergencies, we have resolved the issue, which
yeah.
Rather than returning people to their wholeness and complete recovery, which takes decades, depending on the situation. Don't you see these national emergencies like the tornado from a different set of eyes now? After this FEMA class?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Anyway, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Not on this.
I do have
Oh, yeah,
a
go ahead, Robin.
comment. When it comes to spending money under an emergency, if an emergency goes on forever like this, it becomes a debatable emergency.
Sure.
So it's not as if your appropriation limits are waived.
Forever.
Exactly. So if it comes to a point where we start to spend money, it either needs to be within current appropriation or we need to go through a process. If you try to spend it under emergency rules, then there's a whole lot of steps you have to take to make that valid. So, and it's very different, an emergency like a major earthquake compared to an ongoing social problem.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that we said at our homeless planning session that we would check in weekly on this. And we didn't do it at our last meeting, so that's why I asked for just an update. I get asked everywhere I go, okay, you guys said you're going to be involved, what are you doing? So this is great. I can talk about two things. We got our code update working, and we've got the mitigation site we're going to be evaluating. I guess my question then is, that's just one aspect of the problem, and are we looking at another sort of planning session, or?
Really, it's up to you.
Okay.
To determine how you want to approach this, whether you like the follow-up. We have a planning session coming up at the end of March. I believe it's on the 29th. Whether you like to continue this conversation, I would love to hear what would you like to have at that point.
Yeah. I think we should continue to talk because we declared emergency in June, and I think people expected there to be follow-up from that, and we're getting, in my opinion, we're a little late getting our wheels going. And I don't have the answers. I just think it's a conversation that we owe the community to keep having, thinking about what the county's role ought to be.
Yeah, and I think by having our homeless coordinator really is going to build the bridges, and that was one of the biggest steps that we took as a county as a result of the emergency declaration, just putting some money to
that position,
hire this position.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
And related to homelessness, Cold Blue has been part of that response as well. And we continue to be extremely proactive as to how we manage the Code Blue and the Hazardous Weather Task Force. Also, Keeley is we'll start working on how we are going to amend perhaps the 5-year homeless plan that you approved. So all that is in the pipeline as to what that we're planning to do. You approved already request for proposals. They include affordable housing and homelessness. And they perhaps could result in an allocation of $6.5 million in 2019. So there is some steps that we have taken. And I think what the challenge is, if I may, is we don't see somewhat of the results on the ground. Since the State of Olympia has that in front of them, and they're constantly on the news eyes in a way. But holistically, we are taking some of those steps. We may not seem, right on the newsworthy type of the spectrum. But we'll continue to work. And again, I have a lot of hope and trust in Key Lee to help us bridge that, to be this regional approach that we have been looking for quite some time.
Regional approach, yes. And since we've identified 2 possible mitigation sites, I've already had people from each jurisdiction say, I'm glad you're doing something, but don't put it there.
And that will be part of the pros and cons.
Yeah.
You really need to assess, and the pros and cons is, you know, the location, the proximity to transit services, transportation, and most of all, is what will be the exit strategy. And that
Right.
has to be a comprehensive look as to how this regional issue that needs to be addressed. In coordination with the local jurisdictions, they may end up leading to a new local agreement as to the roles and responsibilities as to how we're going to be managing those mitigation sites regionally.
All right, anything?
Are we to commissioner items?
No. Anything else? Anything else? Thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks.
Do you have commissioner items?
I do. I'll try to be quick.
Okay.
I got timed out last meeting. So.
Oh, okay.
I'll just have one quick one.
Okay, go ahead. Can we start with Ty?
Oh, yes,
You got timed
certainly,
out last
certainly.
time. Go ahead and start.
Okay, I'll be quick. So it's just 2 ideas that have come, and I wanted to bring them to the board and see if there was interest in pursuing them. If so, I'll do more work on it, maybe, but I'll just throw it out there. It's kind of under the theme of expanding inclusivity, you know, the appearance of inclusivity of the county to our citizens. One of them is something I'd never heard of. There's apparently something called an Accessible Community Advisory Act, Commission Act, and it basically says that if a county creates an accessible community advisory committee, they then can be eligible for certain monies from the state to implement the projects that are identified by the people in the committee. This is about people with disabilities. The committee has to include persons with a diverse range of disabilities who are knowledgeable in identifying attitudinal, programmatic, communication, and physical barriers in the county. And there's a whole bunch of different activities that they can make recommendations on, and then they can get actually money for their per diem and their time involved in working on the community, and they can actually apply for, it's not a ton of money, but it's a few $100,000 the state makes available. It's something that a citizen approached me with. It seemed reasonable. I don't know if the commission's ever considered forming such a committee.
Do you have the RCW?
Yes, it's right here, 3601310.
And the intent is to identify?
Yeah, folks with disabilities, you're asking a committee to form and address the needs of persons with disabilities and emergency plans, advising county on access to programs and services, new construction or renovation projects such as sidewalks or pedestrian access where we need it.
Yes.
Greater awareness on disability issues, disability parking enforcement, things that the community, gaps in the community that you may not, we may not have seen before, and it just seemed like if there's money there for the county to get to help access, it seemed like a kind of a good idea.
Well, to that end, I just read in the paper this morning that DRW is acting on behalf of someone else in some other state, I believe California, I don't think he's here, and banning the motorized scooters from sidewalks because people that are sight impaired are getting mowed down.
There you go.
And now they're being robbed of a safe route for them. So that's something we wouldn't consider.
Right.
So, or had thought of rather, so I like that.
Yeah, we'll look into that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Second one is something that the idea of potentially flying the pride flag over county facilities. In the city of Lacey did this. They actually voted to do it for a whole month. My proposal was the weekend of Olympia's celebration and the parade. Actually, Commissioner Blake and I were challenged at a forum whether we would commit to doing that, and we both said we would.
We've
been doing it.
Oh, we do that.
We've been doing it. Yeah.
Oh, we have.
No, we fly the pride flag.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Well, it was people from Lacey asked me, and P-Flag organization said, would the county agree to do that? And I said, yes, I would, and I didn't want to drop the
We've been
ball.
doing that for 2 years now.
It was 1 year that the flag was larger than the U.S. flag, so then we needed to ask for a shorter or a smaller one. That's the only. But
Is it for the weekend, or when do we do
no,
it?
we
All
had
week
for the whole
we did
week.
that one.
Yeah,
Okay, the
full
week.
Yeah.
Well, Commissioner Blake should have piped up and said, we already do that.
No,
He didn't say that. He just said, sure, I would agree to that.
We do.
And I know we've been doing it the 2 years that we've been
We
here.
secure a flag of our own, as opposed to asking one of the groups.
Yeah.
In fact, we have, that week, we have come some of the groups, and we have an acknowledgement and a proclamation. And
How long have we been doing that? Do you know?
Just the last 2 years.
No, at least for the last 3 years.
3 years?
3 years? Just since Bud's been there.
I thought just since, yeah. Yeah, we've
Okay,
been doing
good.
it.
Well, that's all I had. Thanks, guys.
God, that was easy.
Easy.
You got win-win. Go ahead, Gary.
Okay, I have just 2 real quick issues. One of them is water quality in general. And we're working now on water quantity with the different WIRAs that we're involved in. But in reality, we almost never talk about water quality. And I know there's kind of like, well, this might be an issue, or that could cause a problem, or something like that. And I know over at Pleasant Forest, we actually have a water quality issue over there. That's where there's about 400 RV lots. I don't even think half of them have septic tanks, to be honest with you. But I would like to see on a map of the county, where are our water quality problems that we have identified already? You hear about Rochester's had some problems because the porous gravel and whatnot down there. I talked to those people down there, and they said their water quality is better now than when certain things were tested somewhere. So I don't know what it's all about, but I think if we're going to be serious about water quality, we should be briefed about water quality. And if there is a particular problem about water quality, then we look at a solution. If we're being misled, we ought to know that as well. And in a couple of cases, we are being misled. So all I'm asking is that we get some kind of a briefing on water quality.
There was a report from last August, from Thurston County about surface waters. And it wasn't comprehensive. They picked a suite of sites, and they looked at all the 5 different major pH level and nitrogen, and they gave kind of there's some chart. It's a 30+ page report. And that could be a starting point.
I think I have it right here. But one of the main things is that if we have a septic system here, it's going to be detrimental to this well over here. And we've got places where we've got 100 septic tanks on 10 acres. Those are trailer park areas. And I've asked our staff to come up with, show us where there is a water quality that's been degraded because of that, because we keep a log on all of our 6-pack wells for like 40 years. So
okay.
let's get a real facts about, are we dealing with fiction, or are we dealing with facts? That's one issue. And on the marijuana issue, I am not an advocate of marijuana, but we have a marijuana industry in our community, and we have regulation over that industry. And as far as I know, we've had no real input from the industry in developing that regulatory process. And if we're going to have an industry in our community that we hope to be a viable industry, create jobs, revenue, all that type of thing, and I'm told we're going to get more money from the state now on marijuana sales. You know, we were getting less than 1%, and I think, it's bumping up to 2% or something now. If it is going to be revenue, I just think that it behooves us to have good public policy. And I don't think I'm capable of developing good public policy without adequate input. And I know that staff, they aren't experts in marijuana or marijuana growing, and they're advising us. So it's kind of a new thing coming on. I would like to see what we could do to, I don't know if you want to call it, make those folks successful, not chase them out of business. I'm not looking to put anybody out of business through the regulatory process. The state has changed some of their boundaries on certain things that can be done. I know we passed an ordinance here a while back, and I just think we need to look at input from the individuals that we're regulating. That's all I'm just saying we need to look at.
So let me see if I understand your request, Commissioner. Back in December,
Yep.
The board approved the interim regulation.
Made
as
it
a
permanent, yeah.
regulation.
Yep.
So what you're requesting is a briefing Because prior to you enacting the interim regulation,
Mhm.
Staff had some options as to how that regulation can be
Yep.
changed to implement a more permanent regulation.
Yes.
But at that point, the board decided just to go with the interim.
Yes.
So what you're requesting is perhaps for staff to come back with a briefing and give you, refresh all that information as to what those potential changes they were considering at that time, and that will be a starting point to get where you want to be?
I guess that could be a starting point, but at some place, I'm not looking for a briefing, so I try to understand it more. I'm just advocating that if we're going to have that industry in our community, that we have input from those involved in that industry as we put together public policy. That's all I'm looking for.
No, but because if, what I hear, if I may, is that you would like to revisit
No.
the marijuana regulation.
No, 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 no. I'm not saying revisit or do anything. All I'm saying is, as a board, we have, I don't know, we got a SWAC board that's overseeing what we're doing on garbage and stuff. I don't know very much about it. That's obvious by the letter. Anyway, so all I'm saying is, I would like to have the industry involved in input. If the industry sees something, hey, why did you guys do that? Or why don't you do this? I don't know enough about it, and I don't know that staff just on their own know enough about it. I don't know, is it a commission or a board or something that we would take input from if we do decide to make change? And I took a tour of some of the marijuana production and processing places here last week, I guess it was, at some, maybe the week, I can't even remember, but sometime back.
Short-term memory loss?
Yeah, and I asked those folks, well, how much input, because they had some complaints. I didn't make note about all the issues because I'm not knowledgeable enough. I asked, was there input from your industry in the creation of this ordinance that we passed? And they said no. So all I'm saying is it fair to regulate if we don't know what we're doing? And if we want to know what we're doing, should we include the industry? That's all I'm saying.
But with all the public hearing that we had input from every one of them.
Yes,
on a
but I
regular
don't-
basis over years.
I know that. We did. For everyone, we did. But I don't think we really had input that was to study and promote whether it's the Economic Development Council or how we want to pursue it. I'm not saying I want to change anything. All I'm saying is, as a fairness issue, do we need to at least ask for input into the regulatory process that's maybe more than a 3-minute testimony?
And I like to be responsive to any comments that I've received from the commissioners.
I know, I would need to get agreement from somebody. I can't do it myself.
So, with all due respect, I'm struggling as to what staff needs to do to address your comment.
All I'm asking is there some way that we can put together, I think they even have some kind of an association now. I don't know that. When this thing first came about, and I was a brand new commissioner, and the whole marijuana thing was pretty brand new, I was asked to attend a couple of their association meetings. Twice, I tried to attend those meetings and just go to them and sit there and listen, and they never showed up. They tell me that they've got a little better process in place now, and they actually have an association. All I'm saying, if we're going to regulate anything, I don't know what we're regulating. Raising chickens, I'd want a chicken farmer there.
Maybe I have a response to your comment. We're going to be in the process of hiring our own economic development manager.
Okay.
And hopefully that will be in place in the next 2-3 months. Maybe that person, as part of the task, will be to start engaging some of those businesses as to how we can encourage, if that is the direction of the commission, encourage that industry.
I mean, I said this is going to take
You
just a
did,
minute.
yeah. At 12:26.
Okay, but we have toxicity issues in our society, and I'm told that hemp is one of the better products to handle toxicity, for example, in the soil. we're talking about biosoils out at Yelm, for an example. And hemp apparently can be grown on that type of deposit. I'm not advocating for it because I think it's in the wrong place. I'm just saying we might be missing the boat to promoting economic diversity, I guess I'll put it, because I think there's some solutions out there that we're not recognizing. And so if we have areas where there is, maybe there's contamination, I don't know. I just want to have input from the industry. I'm not advocating for the industry. I'm advocating for doing the right thing, the same as I was advocating for SWAC. Let's get it right. That's my whole thing in life.
So we just regulated recently, no vaping, no tobacco products on the trails and in the parks.
Yep.
You want to hear from the tobacco and the vaping industry then about how to make them successful?
No, I don't.
Thank you. So,
TRPC, they mentioned that there's a bill in the legislature like promoting hemp.
Oh, God, I don't know anything about that.
So,
But I would, from an agricultural perspective, it can be used for clothing and fiber and paper and all that. I'm not advocating for it. I'm just saying let's look at everything. If we've got an industry that's just getting started, let's work with them instead of against them.
I agree 100%. I wasn't there when you voted on the interim regulation, and if you didn't have input from the industry, you should have.
okay,
But it wasn't my fault.
tons of it. That's way back when you learned that noxious weed had nothing to do with the marijuana industry. You have what you need from Commissioner Edwards?
Yeah, and what I got out of your two comments is we come back with a briefing related to water quality, and and then we'll address the marijuana industry when we hire economic development manager.
Yeah, okay.
We go back to Commissioner Minzer. We'll look at the perhaps formation of the Accessible Community Advisory Committee. That is under RCW 3601-300, and we'll come back with some.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. I'm shutting this down now out of respect for staff because we've been at this for over 2 hours since the last break, and we have to be back in an hour for the meeting. Thank you. Thank you all.
Oh, boy. Legislative process.